more than 20 years, the man sitting across from me has been an absolute force of nature. When he walks into a building, the energy in the room changes instantly. He has a presence that cannot be taught, manufactured, or imitated. We know him as a master of his craft, a brilliant mind, if you will, a manager of champions who has helped define some of the greatest moments this business has ever seen within the indie scenes. He is a showman. He is a leader. He is a strategist. He is a true icon of professional wrestling. But tonight, I want to look beyond the titles, beyond the roaring crowds, beyond the unforgettable moments, and beyond the larger-than-life persona that people have come to know. Because behind all of that is something even more remarkable. There is a man of tremendous intellect, a man of incredible loyalty, a man who has experienced the highest of highs and undoubtedly faced moments of challenge that has helped shape the persona he is today. There's a heart, a depth, a wisdom, and a humanity that the fans rarely get the opportunity to capture. And that is the person I want to talk to tonight. Not the manager, not the character, the man. Tonight, we're going to go deeper than the wrestling business. We're going to explore the memories, the lessons, the people, the sacrifices, the victories, the challenges, and the moments that truly matter. We're going to talk about the journey that helped create the man beyond who he is today. Because sometimes the most fascinating story isn't the one we have watched unfold in front of us. Sometimes it's a story that has been quietly carried by the person standing behind the microphone. And after more than 2 decades of watching this man captivate audiences, command attention, and leave an unforgettable mark of professional wrestling, I am truly honored to have the opportunity to sit across from him, not just as a fan of what he has accomplished, but as someone who genuinely appreciates the human being behind those accomplishments. Tonight, we're asking deeply personal questions. Some may make him think, some may make him laugh, some may bring back memories, and perhaps a few may reveal a side of him that even longtime fans have never had the opportunity to see. This is a conversation about a remarkable life, an extraordinary career, and the person behind one of the most unforgettable figures in wrestling history. So please welcome a true master of a game, a man whose intelligence, passion, loyalty, and personality have made an impact on professional wrestling, a man who has earned the respect of his peers, the admiration of fans, and a place in the history of this incredible business. But more importantly, a phenomenal human being. Guys, welcome to Get Your Bell Rung, Pro Wrestling Podcast, and I welcome Stephen E. Stephen, how are you?
Wow, KG, man, sitting there listening to that just give me goosebumps, brother. I've done a lot of podcasts in my life, and I've done a lot of them. I've done a lot of them in character, but coming on here and actually getting to reveal the real Stephen E. kind of makes my stomach, turn a little bit. It tickles it a little bit, and that's not something I don't get nervous about things, but I may be a little nervous after that introduction, man. But thank you for the kind words. I appreciate that 100%. I like to think that I know all that stuff. But hearing somebody else say it makes me really feel like I've done some pretty cool things in my life and accomplished some really cool things. So thank you very much for having me on Get Your Bell Rung podcast, man.
Look, I appreciate you coming on. This has been a long time coming. I've been wanting to have you on for a while. I was first introduced to you. It's only been a couple of years. And
Mhm.
before we get into who you are, I got to tell you, as a wrestling manager, which is the lost art in professional wrestling to a degree today,
Yeah,
you have the capability of making people hate you when you need to
yeah,
right away. And you do it without I don't know the words to explain it. I'm not a pro wrestler, but there's ways to get cheap heat and then the ways to get genuine heat. And you're the manager that knows how to get genuine heat. And I'm a heel guy. So I was just drawn to you right away. And I'm like, I've got to have this man on my podcast because in order for you to have the persona that you have, to be as good as you have, there has to be something very interesting about you, the person and the man. So thank you
hell,
for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You just like you said, KG, it's a lost art form, man. I mean, like, we have a handful of them nowadays, but professional wrestling managers are so vital in the old school production, the old school presentation of wrestling. You always had, a manager with guys, and years ago, you'd put people like me with people that weren't necessarily comfortable on a microphone,
Right.
or just couldn't get out there and get that heat from them. Call it experience, call it whatever you want, but I just have a natural ability to walk out there and just immediately have people hate me. And I don't know what it is because I'm really a nice guy,
You are.
yeah, but there's a switch that gets flipped right before I walk out. I had a buddy tell me one time, he come up to a couple of shows that we had done, and he goes, brother, I love you to death, but I don't know what it is about you. When you walk out that curtain, I hate you. He goes, I don't know if it's because you look like a politician or you just look like somebody I shouldn't like. And I'm like, thank you very much. In this business, people have asked me over the years, like, how can you stand for people to yell at you, to boo you, to throw things at you, this, that. And I tell them, brother, that's a standing ovation to somebody like me. Like if I'm out there and I'm doing that, then man, I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And my job at the end of the day is for you to walk out and go, God damn, I hate that guy, or whatever the case may be. My job is just to draw emotion from you. And after 28 years of being in this business, KG, I've mastered that, and I love it, man. I love it. It's not any one thing in particular. It's a combination of things that allow me to do it and to go out there and to immediately, whether it's give somebody a look, whether it's just smirk at somebody and just act like a better, I don't know. It just whenever the light switch hits, brother, it's all business, and let's go do it, and let's make sure that they hate us before we leave. I've been told when I went to some shows is like, look, the purpose of you going out and cutting a promo is that I want you to be escorted out of the building tonight. And so I go out and do what I can do to try to make that happen. But I love it. I love it. It's a great feeling when you go out there and you pull those emotions from the people, and you just see them so upset. And I'm not one to have stuff thrown at me, but when they take these streamers and stuff like that and throw them at you because they just hate you, you're doing your job, man. You're doing your
And,
job.
real quick, Terry Zeller says, "Good evening, gentlemen." Terry, brother, thank you for being my faithful listener. I appreciate that. To your point, before we get into these questions, you're right. You are a nice guy. Look, I'm a professional wrestling fan. I don't like taking a peek behind the curtain. I'm not one of those
Hmm.
guys. But unfortunately, getting involved where what I got involved with, I am taking the peek behind the curtain. And I got to meet you, and I've gotten to spend a little bit of time with you and talk to you a little bit. And you are a nice guy, but this is the thing: you're so good at what you do that even though I know you're a nice guy, when I go to the show and you're there, I forget that you're a nice guy, and I genuinely don't like you. And that is a compliment to you. That's how
Yeah.
good you are.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's an art form. I certainly don't consider myself an artist, but I know what I do when I go out there is something that I can compare to art. My wife, who has a degree in public speaking, and is an executive for a huge company. She just can't do what I do. I go out there and it's just a natural. Well, I say it's a natural thing, but again, after being in this business for 28 years, is it natural? I've just learned what to do over the years. Listen to the right people, and took advice, man. I still take advice after 28 years. If somebody says something, I listen, because I don't know everything. And I think that's something that a lot of people, they get into the business 4 or 5 years after they're working matches, 6 years after they're doing matches. They think that they know everything and they don't need to be told. Well, you know what, man? If somebody pulls me to the side and says, "Hey, blah blah blah," I'll always, I still, still the gentleman, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, thank you very much, and always listen to the people who have been here before you, even if they haven't been here before you, and they see you make a mistake, and then they say, hey, you might want to, that's something that, good when you're around good people and you're a good person yourself, man, people will point that kind of stuff out to you. And man, I'm a testament to just being around good people my entire career, whether it's mid states, whether it's SICW, WFC, whether it's Ozark Mountain Wrestling, Crown, it doesn't matter. I've I've just been around a long time and have worked with a lot of great people.
Thank you for joining us, Robert A. Dale, Jamie. Sorry if I didn't. Some of you guys' names kill me. Look, he says I am not a professional wrestler either. KG as well. Stephen E. Lucky P. Larson and Travis Cook keep calling me wacko for absolutely no reason at all. I even have autism as well. Again,
I
this is what I'm talking about, though. You're so good at being not liked. That's almost like a compliment, is it not? That a fans come over here.
that it is. Aaron Wallace absolutely loves me, whether he wants to admit it or not. He loves me, and I know he does. And Aaron, next time I'm in Belleville, I'll go ahead and reach out to you and take you out to lunch or something. I don't know, but anyways, yeah, it is a compliment, man. It really is a compliment. When people can't distinguish the character from the real person, but it's all good because you know what? I really don't, like. I don't know, I'm kind of old school, so peeling the curtain back a little bit is still new to me as well. I try to get used to it. I'm trying to get used to it, but we live in different times, KG, and you've got to evolve, and that's where the business is kind of going. I mean, like, what was it, like a year ago? They did what is that, Unreal, or I think we're basically they go behind the curtain and show everything. I mean, like everything. Uh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Lucky P. Larson. I love that guy as well.
Mm.
Esquire, manager to the stars. Yes, you are, sir. He says, if this fine gentleman had to pick another manager other than himself, who he has nothing but good things to say about, who also may be an attorney and may carry a briefcase to the ring, who is literally hated almost as much as he is, who would that be? Realize there are a lot to choose from.
There are a lot of people to choose from, but there's really only one person that comes to mind, and that is Mr. Esquire. Mr. Esquire, I tell you what, we have had many of business meetings, we have had many of sit downs, and have had some good times speaking about the platform and all that other stuff, or what we want to do with some of the talent, maybe doing some talent swapping or something like that. Lucky P. Larson is if I'm being honest, man, he's another one, dude. He's another one, man. Like, that guy is a heat magnet. He
Yes.
just looks, he's like me. He looks the part. The guy is a legitimate attorney. So, he's very, very, very well put together. And if there was another manager on the independents that is active on the independents that I would say would be my counterpart, it would be none other than Lucky P. Larson, man. Like, Lucky's a great man. I'm glad to call him a friend too. So,
Yeah.
that
And
that's it.
and Lucky, you're someone that you are on my list, brother, to get on this podcast. I haven't reached out yet. Our move in 3 weeks across country has slowed me down a little bit, but trust me, you are on my list. Joe Helms, who's also be coming going soon, says he heard he had beard fleas. LOL. Yo.
Joe's just mad because he can't grow a beard like this, and he always talks about beard fleas and stuff. But Joe has that little chin strap, is what I call it. I think Joe needs to worry about getting that centered out before he starts talking about fleas. But yeah, yeah. Joe's one of those guys, like, I just can't get enough of that guy. Like anytime he opens his mouth, I want to just punch him right in the jaw. He just he's not been friendly to me for a couple of years. In fact, I think he still owes me $5,000. So,
Wow.
why don't you go ahead and send that in the mail, Joe?
And maybe we'll talk about that, Joe, when you come on, man.
Oh,
Steven, look,
man.
people know the manager. And for those who just joined in, what we're getting into right as of right now, we're going to be talking to Stephen E. the man. This is the first question I want to know from you, sir. What is something that you've done that has absolutely been so Stephen E., but had nothing to do with professional wrestling?
Gosh, man. I don't want to come off like too big of a heel, but I've I've thrown many of people out of my place of business. You know, my place of the business. I own two businesses here in Missouri. I'm a pawnbroker, so you know, like when people, it's funny because when I come out and people look at me, they think, "Oh, look at all those rings, they're fake." Yada yada. Well, trust me when I say this, they are not fake. I have plenty of gold, more than I know what to do with, but. Let's see. I guess one of the things the guy came in and had really upset me at the shop, and he had something that was in pawn, and I told him if he didn't come back and pick it up, that I'd take it outside and throw it down on the ground and break it. And he ended up coming and picking it up, but I swear I had every intention if he was going to come back, if he was going to leave it, that I was going to take it and just smash it on the ground. He pissed me off so much. That's a Stephen E thing, but obviously I didn't do that. But man, as far as Stephen doing Stephen E things, that'd be, man, I wouldn't be well liked out here, if I was doing that kind of stuff on the streets, man. At least maybe not necessarily well liked, but I'd probably be walking around with, a couple less teeth and, a black eye or something like that. But then again, if Stephen E was walking on the street, Stephen E would have somebody like Attila Khan next to him, or
Right.
Peyton Ayers next to him, or Scott Hansen next to him, Austin Lee. I would always have a tough guy next to me. So, that would afford me a little bit more of an opportunity to run my mouth to people.
Right. And look, every question, there's a reason why I asked that question because I figured it'd be something like you said that there's not a whole lot of Stephen E things that you really do in real life. And the reason why I asked that is because I want to get to what is something that you do in your everyday life that will completely destroy your image because of people viewing you as Stephen E.
Gosh. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything in my everyday life that I could do that would destroy the image, just because the nature of the business that I'm in. I'm always going to be viewed as a bad guy because,
Right.
like obviously, back in the 50s and 60s, pawn shops were places that criminals frequent to fence their stuff off, and obviously that's not the case now. But you know, shoot, I think the pawnbroker, side of things probably makes me look like a bad guy too, when that's not necessarily the case. So I don't know if there's, anything out there that I could do that would help the image or even hurt the image. I don't really know, I guess.
PIRI's wrestling, Stephen. They want to know, Stephen, how many years have you managed?
I made my managing debut in 99, so we're right at about 27 years. I made my wrestling debut. First time I ever worked on a wrestling card, I worked on a card as the Music Man. And this was back in the day when we had the really, really high tech gear for a show, to run the music. So people would show up and they would actually have cassettes, and they'd give me the cassettes, and of course they would line it up to where their music was needing to be or whatever. And I'd put it in the old little ghetto blaster, or not ghetto blaster. What do you call them? Just little radios,
Yeah, right.
CD players,
Yep.
and I would take the microphone and put it up to the speaker, and that was how we got music. But but eventually, I started working as a ring announcer, shortly after that, and was doing some ring announcing. And from that point, they wanted to put me at a commentating table, and I did commentating for a show, which at the time was over a live crowd, which I absolutely hated because they wanted me to be a heel commentator over a live crowd. And I think that taught me early on that I couldn't do certain things, because if I did certain things, then that took away from the match. One of the things that I've preached over the years to guys that are coming up that want to do what I do is, like, do your best to not take away from what's going on in the ring, because at the end of the day, they're not there to see me make an ass of myself outside of the ring. They're there to watch those guys wrestle. So anytime people would start to, maybe chant Stephanie or something like that, I would look over to them and not really try to acknowledge it, because I didn't feel like that they needed to be chanting they didn't need to be making that chant while these guys are working, especially if these guys are working, getting ready to go into a good spot or whatever the case is. So, I developed a pretty good idea of when to get the heat compared to when to not get the heat, and obviously if the guys are working, I don't try to get the heat, you know what I mean? So, so working, for 28 years has taught me a lot of different things, but before, after I did the commentating thing, I was approached by a promoter, and he says, he goes, "Hey, we want to make you a general manager." This was back in the late 90s, so the general managers were kind of a big deal. Mick Foley, I think a handful of others were starting to pop up on TV and stuff, so they said, "We wanted to make you kind of a general manager type character." And I thought, okay, well, let's do that. And that really was the birth of the Stephen E character. I would go out there and and do what I was doing, and I got myself over really, 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 really good really quick, because I was just able to connect, and I think, when you connect and you connect organically, it makes a huge difference. Nothing I felt like I was doing was feeling like it was forced, and like there's sometimes you go out there and guys always hit the cheap spots that they know they're going to get heat, whatever, insert town, this place sucks or something like that. I try not to do that kind of stuff, but there are certain things that I do that I have always worked and will continue to work until the end of time, because in pro wrestling, I don't think that if it's broken, you should be trying to fix it,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, a lot of days, a lot of times nowadays, you see people that are trying to take something that has worked for 50 or 60 years and try to reinvent it, and it just doesn't work a certain way, or they shouldn't have tried to do it that way. They should have done it the way that it's been done for the last 40 years, and it would have gotten over, but again, I know the product evolved, and and you've got to evolve with it. But at the same time, man, like, if it's not broken, don't fix it, man. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel.
Right. Lucky Pete Larson says, back at you, Mr. E. Happy to be on whenever, so Aaron Wallace can mark his calendar. And Mr. E, say hello to Miss E. And guys,
I will definitely.
and Scott, I'll get to your question in a second. Stephen, you talked about how long you've been in the business, how long you've been managing. Do you feel like it's been a lot easier for you to understand what your role is in professional wrestling as a manager versus who you are as a person when Stephen E's character is pushed aside and you have to be who you are?
Well, some of the best characters in professional wrestling, KG, is always an extension of yourself. You know what I mean? The ones that really stick out are the ones that's really how they are. They just amplify it by 10. You know what I mean? I'm a decent guy outside of the world of wrestling. I mean, there's times where, like, people can't pay for their food around me. You know what I mean? Just because I'm very blessed. I've done very well for myself in my life, and it's just one of those things that I'm really a nice. My wife, it's funny, my wife has told me before, she goes, "Why do you gotta always be the biggest asshole in the room?" And excuse my language, but
Very good.
it's like, because that's what I'm asked to do, and I can do it so goddamn well, and it's great, man. It's great. I've been, again, over the years, man, I've met people that I was a big fan of. There was a manager that used to work out of Arkansas that worked for a company called TCW, named Boyd Bradford. I don't know if you're familiar with TCW, but great company. Matt Riviera was the promoter for it and did a good job promoting it. And Boyd Bradford, I can't remember the name of the misfits that he ran, but it was like Cerebus, Gary Graham, and a couple of other guys. Just a great, 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 manager. I'm watching him, and finally one time I'm booked on a show and he's booked on it, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go up and say hi and tell him I'm a fan. I go up, I say, "Mr. Bradford, I'm a huge fan. Thank you. It's good to meet you." And he looks at me and he goes, "Stephen, we've already worked on shows together. You don't remember?" And I was just like, "Oh shit," like kind of embarrassed, but then again, at the same time, it's like, man, I've taken some bumps and bruises over the time that maybe left me a little concussed, so I don't remember everything. But whenever I meet people that I'm like, that's cool, and then they're like, yeah, no, we've already met, man. Like, you're awesome, or dude, I've been watching you on TV for a while, and you're great. I love you. I always get a kick out of that kind of stuff.
what always fascinates me, and this is, I just recently started asking this question because I read an article about the guy from SOA who played Jack Teller, and after that part
Hmm.
was done with, he literally had to go through therapy to get
Hmm.
out of that role because he played it for so
Yeah,
long.
that's
How do
right.
you how do you turn it off? You talked about being married with your wife. You have your own business. Obviously, you cannot be Stephen E. and have a successful business outside of professional wrestling.
No.
Do you have a problem turning it off and turn it back on at
Brother,
times?
it gets turned off the moment that I hit the curtain and I go through the curtain. Whenever I go into the back, of course, I'm not that, but it's an ability, maybe like I said, maybe consider an art form to be able to flip that switch on and then flip it off, going out, coming back and going out and coming back. I certainly I wouldn't be well received by locker rooms and by other people if I was still that character coming back through the curtain. I wouldn't do that. But again, it's just a testament to what I do and how long I've done it and how good I am at it. And regardless of what anybody says, they can't take that away from me. I know that I'm good at what I do. I know that I'm good at what I do, and no one's really even ever questioned me about it. But there's times where you start to go, well, like and then something fires up creatively in your head, and then you lay it out, and it's like, okay, here we go, let's go. About 4 years ago, I decided like, maybe, after being in the business for 20, 23, 24 years, I think I'm about to go ahead and start developing me an extra exit strategy and do that. And then, man, then my St. Louis bookings picked up, and I told myself like, I'm not going to quit, man. I'm still having a good time, I'm having a good time. I still enjoy doing what I do. My wife, who is just a huge supporter, man. Thank God I've got a wife that lets me do what I love to do, because you know how hard it would be if I didn't have that behind me telling me, yes, go ahead and, go spend the weekend with your buddies, go spend, 5 days in Vegas, or go spend 4 days down here, or whatever, and to know that she supports me, she calls me and tells me she loves me and all that stuff. It just makes it that much easier to go out and do what we do. So I think that's a big thing. That's one of the biggest things, is that you got to have that partner, you got to have that person that is right by your side, supporting you, whether it's just words of encouragement, or whether it's just giving you a pat on the back or whatever, because there's times where I'll come home and I'm just like, I just didn't play out like I thought it was going to be. Not very many times, but a few times. And then, she's just like, oh, you're going to be all right. Just words of encouragement make you pick your head up a lot easier, and move forward.
Scott Rogers says, or wants to know who on the SICW roster is a thorn in your side. I imagine there's a long list.
Oh, there is a long, long list. Where should I start? Should I start with Bobby D? Should I start with Big Tech? Should I start with Gary Jackson? Really? He's not necessarily on the roster, but the biggest, the biggest thorn in my side is the man that runs the show, Herb Simmons. He is he's been a thorn in my side for a few years now. There was a point in time where I thought I was on the verge of owning SICW. I had a group of investors that were behind me, and those group of investors had more money than we knew what to do with. And I did my best to convince Herb, hang it up, brother, hang it up, hang it up. But when it was all over and done with, the one thing that I had left out of that whole equation when I was putting together the plan to take SICW is the love that he has for the fans, and how much the fans love him and love SICW. If it wasn't for the fans of SICW, I would own it today. I would be the one calling the shots. I'd be the one going to the Worldwide Technology, racetrack. I'd be the one that would be going to the what is it, the Belle Claire Fairgrounds, Fair St. Clair, or whatever it is, here in a couple of weeks. I would have been the one that would have been, highlighting all those matches and putting them on. But I couldn't, we couldn't. I brought the big guns out that night, KG. I don't know if you remember, but I brought the big guns out here. I brought out Haku and Barbarian, and they teamed up with Attila Khan,
Yep.
versus Gary Jackson, Ron Powers, and what was that other guy's name? Danny Boy
Yep.
Hawkins. It's like, and you know, still to this day, like I said, you talk about thorn in my side. Herb Simmons, what does he do? To control me, he takes a pair of handcuffs and he handcuffs me next to who? Bob Orton.
Mark,
What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Handcuffed next to Bob Orton? Every time I tried to get up just to offer a little bit of advice to my guys, he pulled me back down. And I don't know if you've ever been pulled with a set of handcuffs on, or you might have. I'm not going to say, but it's not something that I want to relive anytime soon. But Herb Simmons has been the biggest thorn in my side in SICW.
Lucky says, Love Boy, he worked with Matt at USACW in Burt for the last few years where he cut his teeth and he misses Matt Riviera. Matt Riviera had no idea that was Chris Cruz's voice.
I know exactly what he's talking about. I know
Question.
exactly what he's talking. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
So where you said Matt Riviera. So Matt has the catchiest theme song ever produced for anybody that was on the independent circuit. I love it, love it, love it. Like, I swear I could just put it on the radio and listen to it. It just, it's one of those theme songs when you hear it, it just kind of just resonates, I guess. I had no idea that was Chris Cruz's voice too. So, yeah, that's cool. You learn something new every day.
Another question. What is the most brutal match you saw of the wrestlers that you managed, like a ladder match, barbed wire, etc., that you said, holy shit, and you were worried about his condition after a spot or a bump?
Gosh, man, I can think of a couple of different ones, and to be honest with you, um, one of them was a barbed wire match, and one of them was a ladder match. The barbed wire match was, God rest his Seven Love Jones, somebody that I broke into the business with, back in 97, 97, 98. Um, the gosh, he was such a good guy. He lost his life in 2012, but I want to say it was around 2004 down in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He was the Mid States Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, and he wrestled a guy by the name of, was it what? No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It wasn't Pimp Tight Kevin Love Jones. Excuse me. I've seen him in one down there that was pretty brutal, but it was Space Cowboy Jason Jones versus Mr. Saturday Night Michael Berry. And it was just brutal. They were busted open. I mean, it was in a bar. So, we had a hot crowd of about 400 or 500 in a small bar down in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And it was brutal, man. It was brutal. We got to the back, and those guys were just busted and beat and bloody, and it was brutal. But in the last couple of years, there was a match that we had, a ladder match here in Springfield, which ironically we're getting ready to have another one on August 8th, just a couple of weeks away, with the same competitor that was in the match before. But he, instead of going up against, let's see, it's going to be Austin Moitalo versus Scott Hansen. At the time it was Scott Hansen versus Luke Langley, two of just some of the best up and coming guys in the Midwest. When you talk about guys that aren't signed, man, it's hard to keep Luke Langley out of the conversation. It's hard to keep Austin Moitalo. It's hard to keep Scott Hansen out of the conversation. Those guys are just good, man. They're really good. And when Luke and Scott wrestled for that, they wrestled for the I believe it was the Southern Heavyweight Championship. It was brutal, man. I mean, it was brutal. The whole crowd was just, somebody had their phone on and recorded some of the stuff. And typically, it's not, I don't want to say it's frowned on, but they try not to let that out, because they do still sell media and stuff like that, DVDs and whatnot. So, people aren't going to pay for it if they get it for free. So they try to keep that. But somebody had leaked video of the spots in that match, and I just couldn't believe it. And I'm sitting on the outside of it, and just like everything they did just was it was brutal, man. It was brutal. And let me tell you what, guys, I don't care what anybody says. When you suplex somebody on a bridge ladder that's about 6 feet in the air between two 8 foot ladders, and you're using the fiberglass ladder to bridge, and you do a suplex on that, when they land, there is no way to not hurt, man. Scott probably picked fiberglass out of his back for the next 3 months after that, and it was brutal, man. It was brutal. It was
Barry
brutal, but
Linda, who had on my podcast, had a great conversation with Israel. So you guys check that out. Manager of Champions, Mac Davis, Stephen E. And Mr. Herb
yes.
Simmons. Speaking of the man, good evening, gentlemen. I truly hope you great ratings don't drop after this
Mm.
episode.
You see what I'm saying? That man right there will take a shot at me any opportunity that he gets. I can do my best to try to just be a gentleman, but there's going to come a time where I'm just going to have to drop the gloves and lay it on him. I just can't do that anywhere near East Carondelet or Belle Claire or East St. Louis because if I did that, boy, it'd be a riot.
What is the biggest difference between the person you are when you're comfortable and the person people meet for the first time?
Oh man. Biggest difference, shoot, I don't know. It depends on if they've met me or if they've seen my wrestling stuff, because at that rate, I usually, I don't want to say, I never I never downplay the character and I never play the character. And I've had people come into my shops like talking to me and say, "Oh yeah, blah blah blah, you're great, this that." I had one guy do that and then come back in about 15 minutes later, I mean in complete full character, like half of his face painted, talking about, cutting a promo while I'm doing something with a camera, like I'm looking to buy like a $600 camera and the guy's cutting a promo on me and I'm like, okay, buddy, okay, okay. But I think the biggest thing that people, yeah, man, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just, I ultimately am a pretty decent guy. I'm a pretty decent guy in this world, and I try to be. If you can't, if you can't go home and lay your head down on your pillow at night and sleep good at night, dude, then you really need to change some things and just become a better person, dude. I try to live my life being a good person. I think my son told me one day, he said, "Dad, you got an altruistic, personality." And I had to look that up and I looked it up and I was like, well, okay, yeah, I guess you're right. I tell people all the time, I could never be a billionaire, man. I just couldn't because I'd give it all away. I just couldn't. I do pretty good for myself, but even whenever I go to like Vegas and stuff like that, man, I always take extra money with me because Vegas has a homeless population, and not only do they have a homeless population, they have a big mental health problem over there. And dude, I don't care who you are, man. If you walk by a person digging through the trash and you got a couple bucks in your pocket, dude, and you don't at least try to help them out, man. I don't want to say you're a piece of shit, dude, but really evaluate your life, dude. I have a saying, man. Every human being has a claim upon your kind office. Do good unto all, especially recommended more to the household of the faithful. It just live and be a good person, man. Don't have to be an asshole. And even if Stephen E, no matter how bad of a person Stephen E was, man, I couldn't imagine Stephen E walking by somebody digging in the trash can and not want to give that guy a little bit of relief. You know what I mean? Whether it be a couple bucks. Now, if he takes that couple bucks and he goes and buys a beer just to be able to escape the realities of sitting in the sun, baking in the Vegas sun, so be it, man. I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? It just makes me feel a little bit better knowing that just for maybe even 10 minutes while he's drinking that beer, he's not freaking hot or whatever. I hate, toxic ass Facebook groups that, are always smashing on homeless and stuff like that. Man, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's something about me that, I hate the problem that we have with the homeless people, not because, they're homeless and they're an eyesore to the streets or anything like that, but because, God damn it, we spend a lot of money doing other shit that we could easily try to cure homelessness, or at least try to like put money in. We mismanage money on the government level so bad, but we can't, make sure that the veterans are taken care of. Give me a break. That's something I guess that most people wouldn't realize.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk. I do my research on my guests, and one thing I was going to get to is you do have a big heart. You're kind of a sensitive guy.
Yeah,
Being
yeah.
being
See that?
that being that you have this big heart and that you know the real you, the guy outside the character, you are a sensitive guy. When you're Stephen E, has there ever been times you went home and been like, man, I got too caught up. I crossed the line. I shouldn't have done that or said that.
No, No, because when I step out that curtain, brother, the switch gets flipped, and like first and foremost, KG, I'm a professional, man. Like I'm never gonna go out there and put so much out there and try. From doing this for 28 years, I've developed, like some habits or some tells. If I'm going by and there's a guy that's just livid because he's heated or whatever, because I'm old school, man. I'll walk around and I'll look at somebody and they'll be mouthing me and I'll tell them to shut their mouth. Some grown men have not been told to shut their mouth, and they're not really, they just, nobody's going to talk to them, or nobody's going to talk to their old ladies like that. And they'll get up and take a step forward or whatever. But I just know when they do that kind of stuff, okay, here's the deal. You lost that privilege. If you look like you're going to step over the line, or come across the barrier, you've lost the privilege, because there's four other sides to that ring that I can go to, that I can give those people shit, and they're gonna just eat it up and love every minute of it. If you get to the point to where you're on the outside and you get pissed off and you're standing up trying to step over, or you're standing up and you want to put your hands on somebody, or you do like, dude, I'll go over to the other side, because the last thing I want to do is provoke you enough to where you put your hands on me, because if you put your hands on me, I'm going to put my hands back on you, and I don't want to be put in that position. I don't want to put a promoter in that position, and it's unprofessional when you see people that are doing that. So I know whenever I hit a certain point, okay, this guy right here doesn't need to get pushed anymore. And maybe some people need to figure that out, because especially over the last couple of years, you've seen more of the videos pop up online where, where a fan gets into a tussle with the wrestler, or a fan gets in a tussle with the manager or a valet or something like that. Like I'm lucky because everywhere I go, I've either got guardrails that keep them off of me, or I've got great security that keeps them off me. That speaks in volumes, because some of the stuff that I do, people get upset. A few years ago we did a show for a what do you call it, a fundraiser for some police officers, and when after I went out, one of the security guys came up to me in the back and he says, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, yeah. What's going on now?" Now you got to understand, I'm wearing my Middle Eastern gear, so that's very sensitive to a lot of people, and I get that. But we get to the back, and he just says, one of the guys out there, tried to pour beer on you, and I went and gave him the business, and it turns out he's an off-duty police officer, and told him, like, well, and I'm not trying to make it tough on you, but don't put your hands on me. Don't pour beer on me. Like, don't do that shit. I don't want to be an asshole, but at the same time, like that day, I remember specifically, I don't think I really gave them much to be pissed off about, but apparently just the character by itself was enough to get them in a tizzy, and get pissed off, and try to assault me. I'm sure if they would have done that, Lucky would have had field day a field day with those guys. I would have probably bought me a new boat.
It's been shockingly surprising to me since I started doing this, interviewing people in the business, just how insecure so many people are, who just seem like they are so just the most secure person in the world. Do you have insecurities? And has those insecurities helped you within your character, or has it kind of held you back a little bit?
Um, I think the only insecurity that I have in the world of professional wrestling would be the insecurity of like what could have been. I hurt my back in the 90s, in the late 90s. Whenever I started training, I trained, and I trained under Jason Jones,
Mhm.
and Jason Jones back in the 90s, you know, had a damn wrestling ring underneath in his house, in his basement, a full-size wrestling ring. And we'd go out there and we'd do what we needed to do, do all our bumps, learn what we needed to do at the time and stuff like that. Well, it was like 98, late 98, early 99. I got into a car accident, man, and just did a number on my lower back. And, from that point on, when they told me you got 3 herniated discs in your lower back, I knew that I needed to start making changes. And, at the time, whenever I would do the research, I know Sean had done some stuff and this, that, and the other, and other people. But like those guys were professional athletes. I wasn't a professional athlete by no means, and I'm sitting here looking at this diagnosis of like, man, I've got to figure out what I can do, and of course, the natural transition for me was to try to get into the ring announcing, managing, that type of thing. And then when I got the opportunity to become a general manager, that eventually led over to the managing role. And like you said earlier, I love it, man. Like whenever I show up to new companies, I'll walk through the door and people that may not even know me, they know of me, and they're like, oh shit, like stuff's about to happen, because they know when I come in that, I'm gonna bring something that we're gonna add to the show, and that's something, when you talk about insecurities, I guess my biggest insecurity was that I never, fulfilled my dream of becoming a full-time wrestler, and back in '07, I won the Mid-States Wrestling Heavyweight Champion and was the champion for 8 months. But of course, when you're the manager champion and you're known as, I don't know, they called me a cheater. I always found a way to win, and I did. And then I had an episode where my back went out on me. And KG, when I tell you my back went out on me, brother, I'm talking when it goes out, I am done. Like
Mm.
I can't get up to go to the bathroom. Rolling over in bed is like I couldn't do it if I wanted to. Anybody who knows back problems, will know this. L3 through S5, three herniations. I've got probably 6 or 7 degenerative discs in my lower back and in my middle back, and then that's not even counting my neck. I had an MRI done on my neck about 6 months ago, and it turns out I've got some issues going on in my neck. But fortunately for me, I'm not out there taking a beating every night, night after night. Now there comes a time, KG, where I have to go out and I have to put things to the side and I have to figure out how to get through it, and I do. I'm always, I am somebody that if, man, if I feel, we had a street fight a couple of years ago here in Springfield, and it was the very first time I had lost in my 20 years of wrestling. At the time, 22 years of wrestling. At the time, I had lost a match, and that was the first one I'd ever lost. And we done that up in Springfield, and I felt like, man, we got to, we can't just end it like that. I've got to take it down and do it in front of the crowd that I cut my teeth on down in Harrison, because for a long time Harrison was the home of Mid States, and that was my mother promotion. And no matter what, no matter where I worked for, I always got the biggest reactions down there. And I felt like that if I was gonna do it up here, then I needed to do it down there. And we did it down there, and it didn't go my way, but I think the people were very, very happy to see me finally get mine, down there. So even though I've dealt with injuries and stuff like that, I always have done my best to try to give the people a payoff. And even as far as this last May, I mean, hell, me and Attila Khan got in there and took on Dangerous Doug Gilbert and Wildfire Tommy Rich, and I mean, you saw it, brother. I was this close to doing it. If Doug Gilbert hadn't hit me with that bat, dude, I mean, I think that the outcome would have been different. But I'm not going to cry over spilled milk.
And
But
by the
uh,
way,
but needless to say,
that was one of my favorite matches, man, of the night. It
yeah,
really was.
yeah. Yeah, it was brutal, man. It was brutal when you're looking across the ring at Wildfire Tommy Rich, who, just happens to be a lot of people's favorite wrestler right now. If you were to ask him who your favorite wrestler was growing up, he'll tell you Wildfire Tommy Rich. Everybody knows that blonde guy from Georgia that gets a lot of TV time, and he's a lot of people's favorite wrestler. If you ask him who his favorite wrestler is, he'll tell you Wildfire Tommy Rich. So looking across the ring and seeing Wildfire Tommy Rich and seeing Doug Gilbert, man, two just absolute legends in the business. It was pretty cool, man. It was pretty cool. And then knowing that I had a Tillicon next to me, so I've always done a good job of surrounding myself with tough guys. Always tried to surround myself with tough guys, because when the going gets tough, man, the tough gets going, and it's easy to send somebody like Attila. It's easy to send somebody like Peyton Ayers. It's easy to send somebody like Kenny Kingston, even Joe Helms. Back when Joe Helms was taking my payoffs. He was a tough son of a gun. So it was easy to walk around with those guys standing next to me, because they knew that they had to get. In fact, if you ever pay attention, and it's always the little things, man. It's always the little things in professional wrestling. Whenever I get in the ring with my guys, I never stand in front of them. I never stand in front of them. In fact, a guy that I started to manage, or I managed, we ended up winning the belt. And before we'd go out, every time, I would always lead the charge. When we would walk out, I would lead the charge. Once he won the belt, I looked at him and I said, brother, you're the draw. You lead the, so that's another one of those things, then he leads, I follow, so then we get to the ring. You never will see me standing in between him and the other guy, because I want to stand behind the guy, because I want that barrier to be between me and the other guy, because I'm a shithead, coward. And that's what I want everybody to I want the perception to be that I'm a coward. So, if he runs and they go at it, boom, I'm out of the ring. I don't want no part of it. I had a guy ask me one time, he says, "Why do you always look over your shoulders?" Because I'm always looking for an exit. I'm always looking for an exit strategy. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight Big Tex. I don't want to fight Bobby D. I don't want to fight, Flash Flanagan. I don't want nothing to do with those guys. I am not a trained professional wrestler, in the sense that I don't have a registration. I don't have anything with an athletic commission. I am a professional wrestling manager, but they like to put their hands on me from time to time, and it needs to stop.
Terry Zeller says Steven is one of the nicest guys outside the wrestling business. Inside the business, he can be a pain in the butt. I will say, though, he may be one of the greatest heel managers of all times.
And that means a lot coming from Terry. If most of the people listening don't realize who Terry Zeller is, Terry Zeller is a former WWF enhancement talent. Man, that guy has shared the ring with people like Undertaker,
Lex Luger.
Jay, Lex Luger, you name it, he shared the ring with them. So hearing that coming from him means a lot. And I can also say, with 100%, honesty, that Terry Zeller inside the ring is one of my biggest nemesis. I can't hardly stand the guy. He always wants to butt his nose into the happenings of Stephen E. And needless to say, he is, there was one time he grabbed me by the ear and pulled me to the back and threw me. I got thrown out of a match. It was Austin Moitalo versus Scott Hansen. I got thrown out. I wasn't going to leave because I don't feel like I should have been asked to leave. And he come out, he grabbed me by the ear, and he walked me back like a school teacher to the detention room and threw me to the back. And it was, I'm sure the fans all loved it. I couldn't stand it. But Terry is one of the greatest guys, one of the nicest guys that I've met. A lot of people, I'll let you in on a little something. I was coming back from an event, and I had a trailer, and I had a blowout, and Mr. Zeller actually stopped and helped me with that, and I am forever grateful for his friendship, and I can't wait to go to the Dominican with that guy. He is, I don't know if people don't know this, man. His wife is a travel agent and can get you some of the best deals to anywhere you need to go. So if you're looking for, a vacation, man, hit up Terry, and he'll get you set up with Teresa. And maybe you can spend some time down in Punta Cana with me and Terry on the side of the pool with umbrella drinks.
Terry is absolutely great. He's someone else that's going to be back on the show soon. Twin
Mhm.
Lakes Sports Network 2096 says Stephen E is the straw that stirs the drink in MSW. He also
Uh,
says you bring in the ratings. And he also said, great to see you back in the podcast world. His Slop Drop podcast was epic.
Oh man, the Slop Drop podcast was freaking amazing, dude. That was such an awesome time. And prior to co-hosting the Slop Drop with let's see, with Sumo, you had Loose Cannon David McBee, and then you had Bad Luck Chapman. Those three guys and me, we were a foursome on there, and we had some really, 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 really great interviews with some really awesome guys, and just had a great time doing it. And it came to an abrupt end, and that right there, prior to doing that, I really didn't feel the need to really branch out and start doing podcasts and whatnot. And after the podcast ended, it really gave me the motivation to reach out and start doing podcasts from this perspective, as far as a host. But when we were doing the podcast, man, I mean, we were catching, I think we were hitting on a weekly basis like 15, 20 countries. Like I think we were top 10 one of the top 10 podcasts for many, 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 many weeks
No.
for wrestling. And it was pretty cool, man. It was pretty cool. But we got that, man, we got to interview people like Nikita Koloff. We got to Joe Galley. We got to interview Trevor Murdoch. We got to do Nick Aldis, which from what I understand, Nick Aldis has a big match coming up for SummerSlam. And
That's what they say.
it's kind of cool. Yep, yep. We had Nick a couple years ago come to East Cronzola, Illinois for an SICW event. That was pretty awesome. Attila Khan defended his St. Louis Classic Heavyweight Championship at the time against Nick Aldis, and I think it was like 2 months later he popped up on TV doing that deal, and it was awesome to be able to work with Nick. So it's cool, very cool.
Who are your heroes outside of professional wrestling?
Gosh, man, outside of professional wrestling, Mike, give me a second. I just buried somebody that I consider a hero outside of the wrestling world, man. That really hit me hard, man. A gentleman by the name of Bruce Trammell. He was a guy that I talked to regularly, and a lot of people may not realize this, but I'm a Freemason outside of the world of professional wrestling, and I have met some of the greatest people in the world through that platform, that connection. But a gentleman by the name of Right Worshipful Brother Bruce Trammell was somebody that I just looked up to so much, man. He was such a good man, and we lost him about 3 weeks ago, and
Sorry
that
for
that
your
kind of kicked me in the butt. Yeah, that kind of kicked me in the butt, and it kicked a lot of people in the butt because he was so well. He was somebody that in the world of Freemasons, man, everybody always has their favorite, and I've had people come up to me and tell me that I was their favorite Freemason, which is just an absolute honor to hear somebody say that. And I would always say, oh, okay, whatever. But then I stopped having that mentality because I started looking at it from the perspective of if they look at me like the way I look up to Bruce Trammell, then that's a huge responsibility for me to accept that because like I must have done something in their life or in the time that I've known them that made an impression on them that made them think that I was that good of a person. And I'm not saying I'm a bad person, but I've met a lot of people, and I carry a lot of respect through Missouri Masons, through our Shine Mosque, through our Scottish Rite, through our York Rite, different organizations within Freemasons. So I guess that's something that a lot of people, if they didn't know, I'm a Freemason. If you ever come to the shows and see any of my jewelry, that's all stuff that I'm a part of, and a lot of the people that I look at and call heroes outside of the world of Freemasons are or outside of the world of professional wrestlers are going to be Freemasons. But it goes without saying, man. If there's one person that I look up to more than anybody outside of the world of professional wrestling, it's got to be my wife, man. For her to put up with the shit that she's put up with over the years. For her to put up with me and the Stephen E promos that I probably cut on her over the year just getting ready for shows, and for her to still be around and for her to tell me that she loves me, man, it means a lot. And ultimately, she's probably my biggest fan, my number one fan, and the person that I look up to the most.
What is something that you learned from Bruce that changed your life more than anything else?
Being a mentor, man, being a mentor, spreading the knowledge that you've gotten or that you've learned over the years. In the world of Freemasonry, I'm a ritualist. I'm somebody that is I like to think I've got the ritual down, but I don't have the ritual down. But Bruce was always somebody that would tell me, do not learn it wrong because or like when I would go and I would we do a thing called mouth to ear. So that's how we learn the ritual is mouth to ear. We recite it to each other until we get it down. Now, I can go into there's certain things that I won't say, but there's certain things I can say. And this is a little long-winded, but here's something that I've learned through the Masonic world remember now thy creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them, while the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out the windows be darkened, and the doors shall be shut in the streets when the sound of the grinding is low, and he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. Also, when you shall be afraid, when that of which is high, and fear shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden, and desire shall fail, because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Wherever the silver cord be loose, or the golden bowl be broken, or the pitcher be broken at the fountain, or the wheel broken at the cistern. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. That is 100% verbatim the way that you would read it, right? If I taught that to somebody else, and to digress, to go back to the original question of what did Bruce teach me? Teach me. Bruce taught me that if I teach something, then I need to teach it right. Because if I teach it wrong, then what we do as ritual will be taught wrong to somebody else. And then in 5 or 6 generations, then it's going to be a muddied up version of what we're supposed to do. And KG, let me tell you what, brother, it is so difficult to try to relearn something. If you learn it in your head and you think that you've done it right for 6 months, and then all of a sudden somebody says, hey, it's not a this, it's a they, you know, brother, it is just going to, you'll never get it. So if I teach something wrong, then it's going to be done wrong. So what Bruce taught me was to make sure to teach it right and do it the first time, and to pound, no matter how much it takes, make sure that they learn it right, because when it comes time for them to teach, then they're going to teach it wrong if it's not taught to them right. So that's one of the things that I learned from Bruce that sticks with me to this day, is when I'm teaching somebody, now that goes through all aspects of life. That goes through, Freemasonry ritual, but it also goes, it's, it's for business, it's for wrestling. If I teach somebody how to do something in wrestling as a manager, I want to teach them right, because if I don't teach them right, then they're going to go ahead and they're going to learn it wrong, and then they're going to do it wrong in front of how many eyes? And if somebody comes up and tells them they're doing it right wrong, they're going to think, well, I've been doing it like this for all my career. Nobody said anything before, and it's a reflection of what I taught them. And I just got to make sure that it's right, make sure that it's done right, because if it's not done right, then it's going to be hard to reteach them. If that makes sense. I hope I
No,
wasn't a little
no,
long-winded. And I
absolutely.
used and I use that as a metaphor, because like I said, what I just said, that long thing, that it's scripture is what it is. But what I said, if you went and looked at it through the King James version, it is verbatim. There is not one word that's off. There's not one word that's wrong, because I learned it right, and I've made sure that I learned it right. So whenever I teach it to people, that's something that sticks with me. I've got to teach it right. And for those of you people out there who are going like, "What? You're not supposed to be saying bullshit." I know what I can say and what I can't say. I am pretty fortunate enough to have, sat in the East. So in some circles of Freemasonry, I'm called a worshipful brother. I've got a little bit of tenure. I've got a lot of respect in the world of Freemasonry, and I know what I can say and what I can't say. So anybody out there going, well, I don't know if you can say that, go look at your bylaws, go look at whatever you can, or give me a call or send me a message, and I'll get you to the right part and show you what we can and what we can't say. And besides, in the world of Freemasonry, they say we're a secret society, right, KG?
Hmm.
Are we very secret? Are we just the dumbest secret society in the world? Because you look in the phone book, or you go type in Masonic Lodge. Guess what? It's going to give you a map and take you right to our door. And then you get to our door, and guess what? We're going to have on our door. We're going to have the square and compasses. So
Right.
now with that said, we're not a secret society, but we are a society with secrets. There's going to be things that I don't say
Well,
and
absolutely.
I would never
I've
say.
been invited and attended dinners with the guys. I
Hmm.
actually have an invitation to join at any time.
Good.
Something I've been thinking about doing. Now, look,
I
we
implore you
had
to
a
get
lot of.
into it.
Was that?
Uh, Go ahead.
No, 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 go ahead, please.
I implore you to take that time and to go down there and to break bread with those guys, because you know what they I used to say all the time, we give men we give the good men the tools to make themselves better, but
Mhm.
that's not really what we do. We give good men we make good men better, is what we used to say. I like to say now, we give good men tools so they can make themselves better.
Well, honestly, the big holdup with my decision isn't a matter of if I want to. It's a matter of we're moving cross country in 3 weeks.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
one of those things.
No, that could wait till you drop cross country and find you somewhere up there. Then you don't admit it'd be easier that way.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah.
Yeah, so we had a lot of questions, so we ran a little long with that. Are you still good with time right now?
Yeah, no, I'm good,
Okay,
brother.
I
I'm
just want
good.
to make sure.
Yeah.
I want to make sure. You mentioned your wife being also one of your biggest heroes. Talk to me your role as a husband. I'm a husband, and I can tell you that there's a lot of shit about me as a man that I thought I'm good. I had to change because I'm not just worried about myself. I have to worry about my wife. And I still deal with that
Yeah.
every single day. What is the biggest challenge you had to overcome as a man in your life, in order for you, you didn't make, you need to change it, not because it made you a bad man, but it wasn't a man you should be with your wife, being that she supports you.
I think one of the biggest things that I had to learn because I don't give a shit who you are in the wrestling world. I don't care if you hit and play on the music. I don't care if you're in the ring announcing. I don't care if you're a performer. I don't care if you're a VIP match guy. You have an ego. You know what I mean? You have to have some sort of an ego, and I think one of the things that I regret early on is that I maybe didn't I maybe didn't check my ego at the door whenever I got home sometimes, but fortunately for me, she understood it. And it's funny, we just had a conversation, yeah, yesterday, about because she's always been supportive and not only supportive, but she'll go to the events. She makes some of the St. Louis ones, some of the most of the ones here. Well, most of the ones here in Springfield she'll make because we live here in Springfield. But she'll make about 50% of the ones in Harrison and new places she doesn't really go to, but she will support me in that sense. So it's always nice to have somebody to drive with. It's always nice to have conversation while you're on your way down there, or even when you're done with the show, because a lot of times, let's just say, you know, uh, we get done with a show at 10 o'clock, right? Send the last fans out the door by 10 o'clock. Well, we still got to tear down. We still got to, I mean, the show doesn't end at 10 o'clock, so we still got stuff to do. And then of course, we all want to go out and maybe grab a bite to eat and, and enjoy some fellowship, talk about what went right, what went wrong, that type of stuff. But she's just always been a good supporter, man. And, I think in the very beginning, that was one of the things that I just, I didn't work on as well as I can now, and that's checking the ego at the door. Nowadays, man, like, it's so awesome to be able to come home and, have her at the door, greet me with a kiss and, ask me how everything was, or, call me before, we go tape TV and tell me that she loves me and, that kind of stuff. It makes me feel good, knowing that I've got that support behind me. And in turn, I just try to do my best to be a good husband, man. I don't go out and I'm definitely not a disrespectful person. I don't go out and try to be disrespectful. I mean, like, I'm not going to sit there and say that I don't enjoy a gentleman's club like the rest of us do, but I'm lucky she understands that and she gets that, and she knows that dad's coming home, and that that there's nothing to worry about. I mean, for God's sakes, KG, we've been married for going on 20, we're going to be going on 29 years next year, but
Wow.
we've been together for over 30 years. So, no time in between where we split up or anything like that. It's been a constant 30 years. So, having that partner has made this journey so much easier, man. And she truly is a godsend for me, and I can't put her over enough as just being somebody that, has always been there, who is always going to be there, and who whenever it's good, things are good. She's there patting me on the back, and when it's bad, she's telling me it's all right. And I don't have a lot of bad times in my life. Like I said, dude, I manifest happiness, man. And that really is truly something guys need to work on. People need to work on that. Is just manifesting happiness, man. Just tell yourself and know that things are going to work out. Things are going to be better. And guess what, man? It always works out. It's like the universal law. It always works itself out. There was a movie that I used to watch that the guy, there was a quote. He said, "Life is like a game of cards. When you're up, it doesn't ever fit. Whenever you're down, you don't ever think you're going to be on top. And whenever you're up, it doesn't ever feel that good. But life goes on. And that's true, man.
Yeah.
So in my life, I've been financially secure for a number of years. So, man, like, take that out of the equation. I love it. I drive newer cars. I live in nice house. All that stuff. I don't ever have to. If somebody said, "Hey, you want to go to Vegas this weekend?" Yeah, I could go get a flight and go to Vegas this weekend. So, that is something that is something that's afforded to me by my wife and by our businesses. My wife, again, she's an executive for a huge company, $500 million
Wow.
company. She's a CFO. So if that tells you anything, so
Right.
I mean, like, She's very smart. Sometimes I look and I go, God damn, what did I do to luck out? And not only that, man, but God damn, she's hot, you know. Lucky, shut up, you know. She's hot, you know. She's good looking. She's very pretty. A lot of times I'll take her when I take her to places that I'm introducing her to new friends, you know, they'll say, "Is that your daughter?" I'm like, God, give me a break. She's 47 years old, but she don't look but 30, you know. And then you see this, you know, it's like I look like I'm in my 60s, you know. So,
Brother, I
but no,
get it.
she,
I,
yeah.
I, I say I get it. Especially when we go to wrestling stuff, I get people will literally double take like, she's back to you. Like, yeah, fuck off. You know?
Yeah, yeah, dude. No, no, it's funny, man. It's funny. You know, I always used to joke about it when people would ask me, well, you know, what does your wife do? You know, and she'd be there and I'd introduce her or whatever. I'd always joke. I'm like, she's a dishwasher for a fast food restaurant. You know, and she's not. She actually works for a franchisee that owns, I don't know, 250 Wendy's and, you know,
Wow.
75, 100 Paneras and a couple of other. But so one day she tells me, she's like, you know, it really pisses me off that you said. I said, what? No, well, don't know. I won't say that then. I'll tell them that you're, you know, the CFO. I say it because it's kind of a jab, you know, it's like, oh, she's a dishwasher for a fast food place. But no, she's the lady who, you know, makes sure everybody gets paid, you know, at the fast food range. But no, man, I mean, like I said, dude, she's freaking great, dude. She's super smart. She's way too pretty for me, you know, like, you know, I'm like almost a Neanderthal and she's like, you know, beauty and the beast, I guess.
Miss Laurie Bird says, Granny Hulkster is watching and says hello.
Holy smokes, Granny
But
Hulkster. That is somebody right there that I absolutely adore.
do you?
She
Because she took
is.
a shot at you. She says, hello, Stephanie.
Oh, Granny, I'm not even going. You know what? No, I'm going to set that to the side, right? I'm going to set that. Granny Hulkster has been around the independent wrestling scene down in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas, Mid Arkansas, and I even think down into like Central Arkansas for many, 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 many years. I love her. I love Anthony. I love David. We lost David a couple of years ago. Granny, it's always good to see you. I love you so much. You know, but gosh, I don't see you enough anymore. Where you been? You know, wait a second. No, where you did? Can't remember if you were down in Ozark Mountain last time, but if not, I'm going to be there next week, so I better see you.
Yeah, she's become a fan of the show. She's been on before to do a recap. I had her as a guest. She just got done with a cruise. She's an awesome lady. I'm looking forward to hopefully meeting her in
You
person
know,
at one of these
KG.
events.
I'm gonna tell you this, brother. I can't tell you, and Granny, this is a testament to what you've done for the professional wrestling business over the years. I can't tell you how many times I've jokingly told people that we need to have Granny Hulkster do a seminar for some
Mhm.
of these workers, you know, and they look at me like, "What? Well, she's a super fan." It's like, no, she can do a seminar on how to get over because god damn, she's gotten herself over the years. She's
Yep.
not even a wrestler, and she's got a fan following bigger than some of
Yes.
the guys that have been on the independents for years, you know. But you know, I love Granny to death, man. She's a great fan. Just you know, I hope everything's going well, Granny. I hope Anthony's doing well, and I hope to see you sooner rather than later.
And she says that she loves you, Stephen E.
I know she does. I know she does.
We talked about changing as a husband. What is one thing you hope never changes about yourself?
Man, you know, gosh, I don't want to put my wife over too much, but I just hope I don't ever stop loving her, man. She put up with me for this long at this rate. I think we're a tandem, you know. It's they you don't just get one. Now whenever people talk about us, they don't ever just say Angela, they say Stephen and Angela. So, you know, we're that power couple, I guess, amongst our friends that has always been constant. I mean, you know, we've had friends that have gotten married and come and gone. You know, I've got one buddy that's been married 3 times since we've been married, and it just has been, you know, it's I've been blessed, man. KJ, I've been really blessed to have, you know, somebody as special as her come into my life because, you know, I mean, when you find somebody that's successful, you're not just finding one person that's successful. It's a two-man team, you know. So the success that I have is you know, is because of her, you know, and because of the things that we've done. And, you know, if she was in this seat and you were to ask her, she'd probably say the same thing. You know, it's like, you know, we crutch off of each other. And I think that is one of the things that one of the things that has helped us create, the lifestyle that we have. I've got two kids, one 32-year-old kid and one 19-year-old kid. And man, we've done really, really well to be able to secure our future and to be able to make sure that my kids' future is taken care of, because yeah, I didn't grow up, with the silver spoon in my mouth. It's like I don't even know how I developed this character that has a silver spoon in their mouth. But at the same time, I never have forgotten where I come from, and just am very blessed, and owe a lot of my blessings to my beautiful wife.
Ms. Larbert says, Great Hulkster, I will be at Ozark Mountain Wrestling on July 25th.
Good. If you're going to be at Ozark Mountain Wrestling July 25th, then you're going to see the manager champion Stephen E. accompany to the ring the handsome one, Scott Hansen. They have a big tournament to crown the Ozark Mountain Wrestling heavyweight champion down there. And our first round is going to be against that genetic freak, Mike Anthony. Now, Mike Anthony, let me tell you what, I've known him for many, many years. I know how tough he is. Have you seen him? The guy is like
Big guy.
jacked. Big, big, big guy. But you know what? He doesn't have the manager of champions in his corner. A lot of people have asked KG over the years, what do you bring to the table? You know what I bring to the table? I'm that one extra degree, because you know what happens when water's 211 degrees KG? It's hot, right? You know that if you studied in school, you know that water is hot at 211 degrees. But what happens when you hit 212? Then you start to create steam, right? So when you create steam, what can you do? You can move a locomotive. I'm that extra degree. You put me in the corner of somebody like Scott Hansen, and miracles are going to start to happen. Things are going to start changing. When I walked in the locker room at Ozark Mountain Wrestling, like I said earlier, jaws had to get picked up off the floor, not because they're afraid of me, because they know the business is literally about to pick up. They're wondering, what in the hell is that guy doing here? Oh my God. I think that's what one of the guys said when he saw me walk through the locker room. He said, oh my God, what is this guy doing here? And Ozark Mountain Wrestling's been on my radar for some time. They got some great talent down there. Sebastian Envy,
Yep.
Mike Devine, Luke Langley, Scott Hansen, Austin Lee. A lot of those guys I've worked with before. But let me tell you what, man, when you see talent like that, brother, it's only a matter of time before the
Absolutely.
manager of champions makes his way down there. And I made my debut last July, or last June, and it was nothing short of a good time. And we're going to continue that on July 25th when we walk through Mike Anthony, and then we beat whoever else is on the tournament brackets, so we can claim that Ozark Mountain Wrestling Heavyweight Championship. It's going to look good on Scott. Scott's a great, great, great. He's a phenomenal. He's a once in a lifetime athlete. I look at him sometimes and I tell him. I told him one day. I said, I tell you, you look like $1,000,000, but if I did that, you'd be needing to take a pay cut. And it's simple. He just looks phenomenal, man. Scott won the Midnight Pro inaugural heavyweight championship less than 24 hours ago, man. So if you're listening and you don't know who I'm talking about, you're going, Scott Hansen, who's that? Just
Yeah.
go to your Google machine, type in handsome Scott Hansen, and prepare to be blown away, man. That guy is just a stud,
Absolutely.
absolute stud.
And Gray Hulkster says she could be in Mike Anthony's corner. And we're going
You
to
see,
talk.
I thought she didn't.
Go
She
ahead.
just said she loved me, but she's going to be in Mike Anthony's corner. Granny,
Man.
I just need to know this, Granny. This is all I need to know from you. And we're going to set the record straight, and we're going to find out where you stand. On July 25th, there may come a point in that match against Mike Anthony where I may need to look at you and I may need to take what you're sitting on. I need to know that you're going to be all right, and that not only are you not going to fight me, but you're going to gladly hand that over to me so I can use that the way that I need to use it on the 25th. So what I'm asking you, Granny, are you Team E or are you going to be Team Anthony? You got
Granny
some
Stephen
decisions to
E
make.
is he
You know what?
is
Don't even answer that. Don't even answer that, Granny. I'll see you on the 25th, okay? I know you're going to make the right decision.
and we're going to get into wrestling, talk about that the last 15 minutes of this podcast. Before we do, I want to talk about you as a father, because you mentioned your kids a couple of times. I can tell you that for me, being a father, my hero has always been my dad. He's my best friend. I lost him in 2008. And as I had kids after he was gone, I often put the expectation of what I thought he would want me to be on my shoulders. which honestly was unfair because I could never meet those expectations that I put in my head. Did you have someone like that in your life that they didn't put those expectations on you, but because of what they meant to you, you put that on yourself and you try to be that person as a father? And how did you deal with that?
I'm gonna really peel the curtain back for you here, KG. I grew up and I didn't my father wasn't around. My dad wasn't around. In fact, my dad has been in this country for 65 years or so illegally. Again, peel back the curtain. So, he wasn't somebody that I necessarily looked up to. You know what I mean? Because, now I've got a ton of respect for him because he's my father, but,
Right.
because he wasn't there for me as a kid, in those years where I really needed to be influenced, I don't feel like that I had that influence. But growing up, when I hit about 12 years old, I think that the school looked at me and maybe thought, he's kind of a problem child. We need to kind of get this kid going in the right direction. And they set me up with a program called Big Brothers Big Sisters. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yep,
Most people
absolutely.
have. It's a national organization. It's a great, great organization. I've donated money to it because of my time. But they set me up with a guy named Marty Zeeb out of California. For those of you that don't know, I'm a California boy, born and raised in the Central Valley in California. I was born in a little town called Exeter, California. Went to school in a bigger town called Visalia. But Marty was a entrepreneur, real estate mogul in Visalia, California. And gosh, like growing up, I think I got placed with him when I was 12 years old, and he was the man that took me to my very first wrestling show. We went to a wrestling challenge taping in Selland Arena in Fresno in 1987. I've actually looked it up. I believe it was either July or September of 1987, and a lot of people might remember it because that was the debut of one Bam Bam Bigelow.
Okay.
They finished up the tournament that they had of managers. Do you remember how they did that gimmick? They had all the managers in like a round robin or a tournament brackets,
Oh yeah.
and then of course at the end I believe it was Slick
Slick
that
Rick.
won the rights to. Yep, Slick won the rights to Bam Bam
Yeah.
Bigelow, and then Oliver Humperdinck came out, and then the main event of that was Nikolai Volkov versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Another thing was the real famous the push-ups. The kid was doing the push-ups, and the $1 Million Man didn't let him get the 15 push-ups or
Oh
10
yeah, yeah,
push-ups and
yeah.
pushed him down. So that's another thing that they had filmed there. But Marty was just that guy, dude. Like I grew up like he was such a huge role model for me. So anybody looking to buy property in the Central Valley, California, man, look up Marty Zeeb, dude. Just an awesome individual, man. But he took in this kid that didn't really have direction and kind of like gave him directions. I can remember when I was like 14 years old, dude. Like 14 years old. Now think about this. I've been with Marty for a couple of years. Well, he won in our area. He won JC of the year, which, like there was the Visalia JCs. I think Springfield has like the JC Club. It's kind of like just, like Saratoga, that type of thing, but they were the JCs. Well, he had won a man of the year for the Visalia JCs, but at the time it was a big deal because his father had won man of the year in like the 70s or the early 80s. And so they were the first father son to win man of the year, award. And I got to go up and give a speech in front of probably 1,000 people, man. I was so scared to death, but that was like literally my first time ever getting in front of a crowd and speaking, and I did such a good job, made everybody laugh, had everybody's attention at 14 years old. And it's like I think I feel like at 14 years old, that's kind of when I realized, like, wait a second, I can talk in front of people. And then of course, like then when I went and graduated, I gave a speech at our graduation, which I killed the speech and stuff like that. And then eventually, I think that kind of gave me the confidence to be able to stand in front of a couple hundred people and grab a microphone and not sound like a mess. You know what I mean? You know, um, but yeah, Marty Zeeb, I've had a couple of different great influences in my life, man. Marty Zeeb was great. My great grandfather, Valerio Zavala, who passed away in 16. He was another one that really made a good impression. I really wish my dad would have been there a little bit more, because I don't have that relationship with him. I certainly don't dislike him by any means, but it's not that father son relationship. But to continue what you were saying, what I do is I want to do everything that I feel like my father didn't do for me for my kids. There'll be days where my daughter will come in, and I was like, "What do you got going today?" And she'll say, "Oh, me and her boyfriend are gonna me and Curve and her boyfriend's gonna go grab some lunch," and I'll reach into my wallet and pull out $40 and give it to her. And stop it, no, stop it. So baby, go. My son, I still send him money. I still send my aunt money. Every month I send her money. To which she says to me, she says, "Stop doing that." She never asked me. I just send it to her, and she'll tell me, "Stop doing that." I'm going to send it back. And I said, "Hey, look, you argue with your grandmother about this." My grandmother passed away in 2001, but that's what I always tell her. I said, "Your grandma told me to give it to you." So, my grandma said to give it to me. So when you get up there, you fight with her about it. And it's just it's good to be able to help those people. But my aunt is another one that has been a real big influence, man. My mom has been a big influence for me. My mom is somebody that I lived with my grandma for probably the first 14, 15 years of my life. And I had a lot of ill feelings towards my mom. But at the end of the day, it's like once I got older, I realized that what she did was the exact right thing to do, because there's no reason to go running around partying with a kid. You know what I mean? And now that she's older, she's 100% responsible. KG, I could not imagine living my life right now without my mother, dude. She's somebody that I talk to every day. Like whenever I pick up the phone, if there's anxiety or stress in my voice, she'll immediately, "Is everything all right? What's wrong?" She's another. I've got a bunch of good role models in my life, man. I've got a bunch of good role models in my life. You know, um, peeling back the curtain a little bit, two people that you wouldn't expect to be role models for me would be Jason Jones and Herb Simmons. Jason Jones is a role model to me because Jesus, look at what he's built.
Mhm.
I mean, we just got done celebrating 24 years of mid-states wrestling. I was at the inaugural show, 24 years and a month ago. And I can remember when we used to go and we'd work in front of 100 people and think like, "Oh, we did it, we made it, dude. We're doing good. This is good. We're on the right track." And then now, if we're not working in front of 600 on an independent show, then we feel like we did something wrong. Again, Herb Simmons, 53 years, I believe he's
Yeah,
been promoting. Those
yeah,
guys right there, man, they know what's going on. They know exactly what the people want. They know exactly how to deliver it to the people and give it to people. So those are the people that I look up to, people like that. And again, Herb to do this for 52 years, man. And you look up and Herb and his beautiful wife Mickey have been married for, I believe, 53 years.
right.
There's a lot of similarities, I think, with me and my wife and Herb and his wife. And, anytime I see Mickey, the first thing she'll usually ask me is, "Did Angela come with you?" And a lot of times Angela can't make the St. Louis ones, but, I'll say, "No, sure." But man, I tell you what, when my wife makes the St. Louis ones, brother, she's right there in the thick of all the enemies. It's like, as far as, the Simmons are concerned, I'm a mortal enemy. But my wife sits with the Simmons. So you got part of the E team over there with the Simmons. And it's great. And man, I look up to people like Herb. I look up to people like Jason. I look up to people like Gary. Travis Cook's another person I look up to. Lucky. I look up to a lot of my peers, man, because they wouldn't be where they're at unless they worked hard, unless they impressed the right people, and unless they did what they needed to do to get there to that place. Because I'm a firm believer that in both in well in I primarily work with SICW, and I work with Mid States Wrestling, but I branched out and have worked for other companies. But and one, like I said, I debuted last month for Ozark Mountain Wrestling. But even the guys over there, everybody that's there has earned their spot, man, and they're there because they are the chosen to be there. And when I get a call from a promoter that maybe I've never talked to, or they send me a message and say, "Hey, you're on our radar. We want to talk about bringing you in." And that makes me feel so good, dude. It makes me feel good that that number one, I'm on somebody's radar. Number two, that I'm doing something that makes people think, okay, yeah, then we want to put this guy on the show. He's going to add value to our show. Last year we were down, not last year, I'm sorry, but the year before we were down at Cauliflower Alley. Of course,
Yep.
you've been to the Cauliflower
Yep.
Alley, and great organization. I would 100% recommend anybody that is a wrestling fan to get your butts up there and go. It's going to be from, I think, the 24th to the
Yes.
28th this year. Get up, go get a ticket. The tickets, from just about anywhere in the country is cheap.
Yep.
Vegas is fun, even if you don't do the Cauliflower Alley. But why you wouldn't want to do the Cauliflower Alley and being a professional wrestling
Right.
fan, I don't know. But there's so much stuff. It basically turns into like a smaller version of WrestleMania. They've got wrestling a couple of different nights of the week. For us at the reunion, we've got all the nostalgia stuff. We've got all the legends walking around. Bret Hart's going to be this year. This year, Greg Valentine's going to be. Scott Romer's getting something. I mean, that's freaking cool, dude. I've seen Rob Van Dam there for the last,
Yep.
4 years. Andrew Anderson and Miss Karen will be there. Just Teddy Long, Mac Davis. I've seen Mac, just Herb Simmons has been out there, Attila, all the guys. We just go out there
Honey
and
Ellis.
we have a good time. But we were out there a couple of years ago, and I had a buddy that lives down in Phoenix, and Phoenix is like 3.5 hour shot from Vegas. So
Mhm.
he said, I want to come up and visit with you, yada yada yada. So we come up, and my buddy gets there, and I was just joking with him. I said, hey, I told my wife, I said, we got a captive audience here, in the area. I told him, I said, hey, don't be surprised if somebody doesn't come up to me and ask me for an autograph or picture. And haha, kind of chuckled about it. And he chuckled about it. Brother, I shit you not. We walked out of the room on the 10th floor or whatever floor we were on, walked out of that room, walked to the elevator, hit the button, elevator opened, somebody's in there. We walked in, said our pleasantries, hey, good afternoon or whatever. Turned around, and the guy just sits there and he looks up at me and he goes, I just wanted to let you know I'm a big fan. Can I get a picture? And yeah, sure, sure, sure. And my buddy's mouth like hit the floor. He goes, "You weren't joking, were you?" And I just remember looking at him going, I thought I was, I thought I was joking, but when we got downstairs, of course, I went up, met up with Attila Khan and Haku, and Haku wanted to do a picture for his Facebook, and he tagged me in the picture for his Facebook, and I swear I probably picked up 75, 100 friend requests just off of
Right.
that picture alone. Going over there and hanging out and doing all that stuff with those guys, man, it really is cool. It does add a lot to what you're doing. Plus, they go out there and they do a lot of things, man. Again, we talked earlier about always having your ears open, always listening. I went out there last year and caught a couple of seminars. It's like, okay, I'm 28 years in the business, like I think I've earned the right to say, well, I know a lot. I don't have to attend the seminars, but it's also kind of stupid to say that because I'm getting the opportunity to go down there and sit there and listen to people talk about something that that pertains to the business that I'm in. So why would I not go down there and listen? I went down there and took in a promoters seminar, which was great. Then I went and I went in and sat in on a social media. Man, the social media one opened up a lot because, apparently there is, a sweet spot when it comes to posts on your post. We post to social media, not to
Mhm.
post every 30 minutes or whatever. There's a sweet spot. And, Brittany Laughlin, when she's a great young lady, love her to death, man. She's a social media, ambassador for a big company. So, when she took on the seminar, man, I was like, I got to be down there. And I've worked with her numerous times, and she's a very smart gal. But doing that, Medusa did a seminar as well. A lot of guys, a couple years ago, they did one on the Memphis territory. Now you think about this: you had Doug Gilbert, you had Tommy Rich, you had Jimmy Hart, and then you had Jerry Lawler, and then you had Jerry Jarrett as well. Imagine sitting down there and listening to that panel. Imagine the knowledge.
Yes.
Let me tell you what, dude. When I got there and there were empty seats, I almost felt almost disrespected. You know what I mean? Like not me, but I felt like it was disrespectful to the panel because you got these guys, brother. I'm telling you, those seats would have cost $100 if you went to a con.
Right.
If you would have went to a con, they'd have cost you $100, and it was free with the
Yes.
banquet. And there was a handful of seats, and I couldn't believe it. I'm just sitting here going like, How can you, how can you not want to listen? Brother Jerry told the story about Elvis Presley. So now at the time, Elvis Presley, the movie had just came out, so it was, kind of front and center. Well, Jerry had told the story about how, Vernon, he got home one day, and this is back obviously when landlines were a big thing, and he was out for a couple of days, goes and hits the message machine, and Mr. Lawler, this is um, you know, uh, oh, Vernon, Presley, would you give me a call back? And he calls, and, somebody picks up and he says, Vernon Presley, is Vernon in? No, he's not in. And he just thought that it was somebody that got a hold of his phone number that was ribbing him. So he said he called back again. They said, no, he'll be back tomorrow. Before, he called back, same deal. He's not in yet. So he just kind of gave up and was like, I'm done. Well, then a couple days later, he gets a phone call. He picks up the phone. Now, this was before caller ID, before all that nonsense. And he says, this is Vernon Presley. And he's like, oh, I bet you're going to tell me that Elvis wants to wrestle. Well, Mr. Lawler, I wanted to talk to you about that. So at the time, Lawler said that Elvis Presley was working on his comeback. Now, if you remember right, back in the 70s, Elvis had kind of put on a little bit of
Mhm.
weight, and Elvis wanted to use the wrestling as a catapult to get himself back into shape,
Wow.
right? So this was about 76 or so. Obviously everybody knows what happened in 77. It didn't quite materialize, but Jerry said that it wasn't uncommon because they'd sell the Mid-South Coliseum out every Monday night. And they
Yep.
said back then it wasn't uncommon for Presley to come up and hang out. And I think like kind of like above the ring or somewhere where you could get a good spot. And so they knew he was a fan. And then whenever he got a hold of Vernon and talked to Vernon, Vernon's like, "Yep, that's what we want to do." And apparently prior to when they were working all this stuff out, getting all the details fine tuned, he passed away, so it never materialized into anything. But it was crazy, dude. And that story alone to me was worth the price of it, the price of the cauliflower alley, getting there and everything. And honestly, I think it costs $350 to be a lifetime member. If you don't want to do a lifetime membership, it's like $40 a year or something like that.
Yep.
I recommend everybody become a lifetime member. It's a one time, dude. The fun, what the Cauliflower Alley stands for, dude, is so goddamn good, man. Like, if you're a worker, some of the people that we all grew up watching, who didn't necessarily manage their money right, it's not their fault. It happens. If somebody gets hurt, man, and they can't afford to take care of themselves, they've got a benevolent fund that they can reach out, they can apply, and they can get a little bit of relief, man. Like that's
Yep.
something that we need, man. Like, there's no reason for people that we grew up watching TV now, whether or not it was because of something they did, it doesn't matter, man. We owe part of our childhood to them, or
Absolutely.
you know what I mean? And to go give $340 is small, it's a small drop. Plus, you become a member, a lifetime member, they send you the magazines and all that stuff. Then you get the opportunity to go out to the light, to the reunion.
Yep.
And let me tell you guys, that reunion is so much fun, dude.
It is.
Everywhere you go, everywhere you look, you see people. And you know what, KG, I grew up in wrestling where they told you, hey brother, you don't take pictures with the talent. If you want to take a picture, you go ahead and buy a ticket. That's just how it was, man. And that mentality didn't change until a couple of years ago. But
Yep.
because of the time frame that I grew up in and learned how to do this, like I still don't do it. Very rarely will you see me with somebody. I think my first ever picture that I put with somebody, I got one with Danny Hodge and Butch Reed.
Mhm.
And at the time we were working a program with Butch Reed, so it was very taboo. I couldn't post it or anything, and I didn't post it. But I can remember when I asked Danny Hodge, I remember it was the same night. I said, Danny, do you care if I get a picture with you? And Danny was a long-standing, talent for Mid States for many, many years. Man, he was on 4 shows a year for the first 10 years of Mid States. I mean, he was our general manager. And I said, hey, Danny, let me get a picture with you, because he's just, he's a legend, dude. He is okay. So remember earlier I said he's your favorite wrestler, Tommy
Mhm.
Rich, right?
Yep.
Well, Danny Hodge was my favorite wrestlers because he, in the era that I grew up in, I grew up in the golden age. So all the guys that were from the 70s and 80s grew up watching Danny Hodge. And a lot of people say, well, Hulk Hogan was the first wrestler to appear on Sports Illustrated. sorry to break it to you, pal, but no, he wasn't. Danny Hodge was, because he was an Olympic boxer. He was also a professional wrestler at the time. So it just, like meeting Danny, dude, I really had to like force myself to be like, hey, sir, can I get a picture? And you know what he did, man? And it really really touched me and made me feel good, made me really feel like I belonged, because I was kind of nervous about it. Number one, because he's one of those old timers like myself. And he told me, he goes, Steven, I will gladly take a picture. Only thing. And I was like, oh shit. But he goes, the only thing, and he pulls out of his pocket a little mailer. You know how back, well, I think I still got them. I get them from time to time. You'll get them from like CD Warehouse or something, where they'll send you mailing labels, right? Where Stephen Espinosa, whatever, Springfield, Missouri. He gave me one of those that had Danny and I think her, was it Rita? I think maybe Rita was his wife's name at the time. Hodge, and gave me. He goes, "I will absolutely do one, but you have to send me a autographed copy." Dude, like, are you kidding me, Danny Hodge? Like, dude, a lot of people don't realize it, but I'm very, very involved in the amateur wrestling scene in my area. I'm a huge supporter of the amateur scene in my area, and like man, dude, like that just meant a lot. So then as soon as that happens, I go to my buddy who runs a wrestling club that is just got a big shout out to Terminator Wrestling, man. That guy right there, Ruben, he creates killers. If you're in the Fairgrove area, Springfield area, you want your kid to be at the next level on the amateur scene, send him to the Terminators, dude. He is a monster. He's the head coach for the Fairgrove girls wrestling team. Their team will start up next year. I'm guaranteeing you, within 3 years, he will have a state champion out of Fairgrove, and they're just starting. So his daughter, who is 11 years old, she's 11, she's a 160, 11 and under. She won the Trinity Award 2 years ago. And I
Wow.
can't even begin to tell you, the Trinity Award, you have to win three major tournaments in the States to even qualify for it. And only 23 people get that award every year. She won it as a 9-year old. She won the Tulsa kickoff. She won Tulsa Nationals, and then she turned around and won Reno. That's like three of the five biggest tournaments for amateur wrestling in the country. So when Danny did that, dude, he kind of validated me. It's like I felt like, that was one of the first times I really felt like, okay, shit, I belong. And because of that, it really gave me a lot of confidence to be able to go out there and to like turn the dial up and to do what I do, and to not like, look, here's the deal. If you get pissed off because of the character that I am out there, bro, go buy a ticket. If you're nobody ever does, nobody as talent has ever been upset. I had a guy this weekend come up to me and tell me, he's like, hey brother, he's like, if you don't mind, I'd love to hit your inbox sometime to ask you for some advice. He goes, you and another Travis Cook, he goes, you guys are just heat magnets. Like, I love, and I told him, and he's like, I run my mouth. And I said, brother, don't you change a damn thing about what you're doing. If they don't like what you're saying, then they need to watch. We're not here knitting, guys. We're not here. We're here selling tickets. And sometimes that's what you need to do to sell a ticket. So if anybody gets upset because of something that he says or something that I say, like, dude, you're on the wrong side of the guardrails, and I hate to say it like that, but it's true. If you get upset, there was a girl that used to take tickets at a company that I worked for, and when she saw the Arab sympathizing gimmick, she kind of took it to heart and was upset a little bit about by it, and it's like, look, if you're upset, then we're doing it right, because
Yep.
you're somebody who gives me a hug and tells me you love me all the time. But now you can't distinguish, or you can't change. You can't look at me the same because of the character that I play. You know, yeah, that means we're doing something right.
Absolutely.
And that character that I have up in St. Louis, dude, they hate me up there. Hate
Yep.
me, absolutely hate me. And that's good, man, because that right there might as well be a standing ovation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I could go out there and, up there, I generally don't even have to grab a microphone. You know what I mean? It's just the presence that I bring. And you've been to the mid-state shows,
Yep.
KG. Like I go to grab a microphone and I can't get a word out of my,
Right.
and it's frustrating on my end because, of course, when I can't hear myself talk, I start to talk a little bit louder and louder and louder, and then it muffles, it's just it's frustrating. There's been times where I've thought to myself, like, I need to just go and buy me a monitor so I can have a monitor in my ear so I can, so I can hear what
Right.
I'm saying, because there's nothing harder than trying to cut a promo and get to a certain spot or a certain point in the promo when you can't hear what you're saying. And more often than not, that's whenever I grab a microphone, that's what it turns into, and
Miss Laura Bird says it's always fun playing with you even after all these years. She's also said that the California Alley Club is on Granny's bucket list. By the way, guys, if you want to join the CAC, go to the CaliforniaAlleyClub.org. I'm telling you, it is one of the best decisions I ever made when I joined. And as Stephen E said, look, we're talking about talking about the guys of the past. These are guys that paved the way for every single professional wrestler that's in the ring right now, for every single manager that's managing right now, without making the millions of dollars that these guys today are making. So a lot of times it's those guys that are getting help if needed, and it's absolutely worth it because they were a big part of our childhood. And as
that's
far
right.
as the reunion, look, it is absolutely, I love it. Believe me, it's killing me that I can't go this year. Killing
Oh
me.
no.
It's
Oh
because of our
man.
move. Our move is happening right during everything. But I
Well,
promise you,
life.
go, guys, buy, join, and buy tickets to go. It is something. It's almost damn near addictive. It is because of just such a great time.
Thank you. Hey, let's talk about Sexy Rexy. He just put
Yeah.
a comment. The Big E is one of the best managers around. Let me tell you what, Sexy Rexy is such an up and comer here in the Midwest region. That guy is such a stud. And I'll be honest with you. 5 years ago, 4 years ago when he broke in, I was like, okay, yeah, I can see this guy. He's going to be around, but you need guys sometimes that can work great, that will be able to put, man, dude, when he wrestled, and I'm not taking anything away from the Rex Amadeus character. The Rex Amadeus character was great. I loved it. When he took on the moniker of Sexy Rexy, dude, that completely changed his character and the direction of his character. I absolutely love you, Sexy Rexy. You are the greatest, and I cannot wait. I hope to see you down there on the 25th down at Ozark Mountain Wrestling so I can catch up with you and all that good stuff. But that kid right there, if there's any promoters out here right now that are looking for good talent, that will not only draw you heat and just look the part, dude, don't overlook that guy. That guy is a freaking stud, man, a stud.
Two more questions for you. One of the questions, look, you've been in the business for a lot of years. You put over a lot of people, talked about their wisdom and their knowledge. You yourself have a lot of wisdom and knowledge, especially when it comes to the business. This is my question. What do you think the new talent, the younger adults into the business, what is missing from a lot of the younger talents today? And what's the best advice you would give them?
And this isn't even something I have to think about. The best advice that I could give a up and comer kid coming up, you know, um, the best advice I could give, man, and like hear me out on this: quality over quantity. There's companies out there that are mud shows that sure you're going to get a paycheck, sure you're in front of a crowd, but they are run by people who do not know how to run a wrestling company, and they really shit on the business and they think that they're doing something grand. I had a guy that was talking about, Brutal Bob Evans put a post on a couple of weeks ago. If you guys don't know who Brutal Bob is, then that's somebody you should get to know. Brutal Bob put a post on asking where all the people were wrestling, where all the mud shows and where all the untrained wrestlers are. And I went through his comments looking for a specific company, and sure enough, one of the first companies that I saw, and I saw somebody had tagged it, and I just said, I won't, one thing I won't do, man, I will not publicly put down a company. I won't say who it is, but everybody knows. But the guy come and says, well, if we're a mud show, then why did Mike Bennett, Rodney Mack, and some another name I can't remember who it was come. It's like, look, pal, they showed up because you booked them. That's why they showed up. If I book those guys to come hang out with me at my house, guess what? They're going to come hang out at my house for 2 or 3 hours. If I pay for their trans, they're going to come here. I try to tell people, don't go do these shows that, that they're drawing 30 people, and 15 or 20 of the 30 people are, friends and family of the workers. It doesn't look good. And then, because what happens, KG, at that rate is, let's just say, when okay, so we'll use Springfield, for example. We've sold out 24, 25, maybe more, 28 times in Springfield. So the fans that have come and watched wrestling in Springfield have come to expect a certain level of professionalism, a certain level of show. St. Louis is the same thing. SICW. When you go to an SICW show, you know that there's going to be a rowdy 600, watching this show. It's going to be produced well. It's going to have professional, talent. It's going to have professional, announcers. It's going to have professional music, all that stuff. But then you got these guys that come in, and and it always seems to happen at goddamn tax time. You guys know what I'm talking about. They'll come in, they'll rent a freaking low boy, and go put, some name on a banner, and all of a sudden they're promoters, and then they draw 15 or 30 people, and they have a name on the card. Well, guess what? They didn't make any money, and then they turn around and they spend their girlfriend's, other part of her, her tax check to put on another show that's not doing. So then what happens when we come through that town, or if they put on them shows, they do two shows, and then we come through the town and then put up our flyers, and everybody sees it and goes, well, hell, we already saw the wrestling last week. I don't, there's not our last month. I don't need to go watch this. When the people don't realize that it's a completely different product. It's a professional product that's done completely different than what they do. It just kills me. And I think that workers, I think some of the legends, not legends, but some of the people who've been to Connecticut, been to Orlando, man, I think it's a responsibility on their part not to give credibility to these mud shows. You know what I mean? It sucks, man. It sucks that's the case. But when you get these new kids, and let me digress, let me go back. When you get these
Sure.
new kids coming in, stop working for these mud shows or these shitty shows that are drawing 15, 20 people in empty gymnasiums. I'll look at these and I'm like, God damn, I know what a building costs, and I know what a gymnasium costs to rent, and they're not even covering the cost of the gymnasium. I don't know how the hell they're paying the talent. You know what I mean? And again, if you're a wrestler and you're working shows, you need to be getting paid. Do not go in there here's another piece of advice. Do not go in there and work for free, because all you do is you devalue yourself when you do that. Because if you go in there and you say, I'm going to work for free, what do you expect them to pay you the next time that you come in?
Yeah.
10 bucks?
Yeah.
You know, dude, 10 bucks ain't gonna cover your gas. You know what I mean? And I know that there's a certain point to where that's what you're gonna have to take. But when you bring value to a company, you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So that's the biggest piece of advice that I could give somebody is, don't go out and put yourself out there to a show that nobody's going to see anything. The only thing that people are going to see, or they're going to see the 1 minute clips that the company puts on Facebook, and you know what's crazy is, one of these companies that I'm talking about, they'll put videos on there, and these videos will get 1.5 million views, but
Wow.
it's for the wrong reasons. They're getting it because they're looking at it and they're laughing at it, and they're making, and I can't imagine what the promoters are thinking, like, wow, we're on to something, we're doing something right. And it's like, no, you guys are like, it's like X-Pac heat and Vicky Guerrero heat. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
X-Pac, X-Pac had that heat where people didn't want to boo him, people just didn't want to see the dude out there. You know what I mean? And Vicky kind of had the same heat, and it's like, is that the heat that you want if you're a worker? Not really. It's like, do you want 1.5 million views on a 3-minute video of a mud show that looks like shit, where the people are basically making fun of it the whole time? Like, I don't think so. I don't think that that's good. But
Right.
but then again, what can you say? I mean, I've only done this for 28 years. Like, what do I know? But
Well, let me build, and I said that there's only two questions, but I want to throw another one in there. Why do you feel like we're starting to see so many indie promotions putting on these type of shows these days? Because look, I'm sure they've always existed, but it really seems like there's a lot of indie, shows like that popping
KG, let me tell you why, KG. Because every Dick, Tom, and Harry thinks that they can be a promoter. And every Dick, Tom, and Harry who has a wife that has 3 kids gets an earned income credit tax check every February, and that's where they get their financing to at least run a couple of shows. Um, they pop up. Sometimes you'll get a couple of guys. Sometimes you'll get a couple of workers that'll find a guy that is going to be their money mark. You know what I mean? That will finance and stuff. Look, promoting isn't for everybody, man. I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm a performer. People come up to me all the time. Hey, brother, let me get into mid states or let me get into S. I say, well, if you want to get into there, you got to get in. Oh, are you not part of? You not owner? No, man, I'm talent, brother. Oh, okay. Well, I thought, and maybe because I wear a suit and, I'm highlighted on those shows, they think I am, but, I'm nothing more than talent. But, a lot of people think that it's easy. Let me tell you something, brother. If it was easy, everybody would do it. If it was easy, you wouldn't have so many people fail at it. You know what I mean? And, you know, uh, everybody starts somewhere. I mean, hell, KG, we worked in front of 75, 100 people and we thought we were successful, 23 years ago, 24 years ago. But, we weren't making money, but we weren't losing a whole lot of money. You know what I mean? And, if you're running shows and you're losing 10, $15,000 a show, brother, you're not doing something. People put too much money into Facebook promoting on Facebook. They think, oh well, I'll throw $500 and put it in and run ads, this, that, and the other. And it just doesn't work like that, man. You have to have that old school mentality. If you have a market, and I'll use Springfield as an example. But when WWE comes to town, which they don't come often, but when they do, we had a show the very next week. Or no, we had a show. Yeah, we had a show the very next week, right? At the end of that WWE show, he had his students, his mid-state students out there handing out flyers because it was a captive audience. Everybody that was there would look at that and go, wrestling, local wrestling. Okay. So there was another company that had a show 2 weeks later. They weren't out there doing that, dude. They
Right.
didn't last a year. They didn't last a year. So what it comes down to is it comes down to the promoter, man, and the credibility that the promoter brings. Jason Jones, brother, he's been doing this a long time. Before he started promoting 24 years ago, he'd been in the business for 5 years. And not only had been in the business for 5 years, he was in the business, looking at it from like, kind of next to the promoter, learning. And a lot of people don't think that they think they know, or they think that they can put their spin on it. They think that they can do wrestling the way that they do it. And great, that's perfect, awesome. Bring in the guys. You can bring in good talent. There's no way around that. But if the show looks like a shit show, then it looks like a shit show. And I'm not knocking. I've worked shit shows before. I've worked shows in Oklahoma where like we showed up and like first of all, I didn't even realize the show was going. We hadn't heard anything from the promoter for 3 or 4 weeks. Didn't see anything leading up. So I kind of assumed that it was canceled. We get a call. Me and Joe get a call at 11 o'clock in the morning. Hey, you guys, what time you guys going to be down? Joe calls me up and he's like, hey, you're supposed to be over here. And it's okay. Jumped in the car and made the town. But we got there and there were literally like, man, brother, 9 people in the crowd. You know how hard it is to cut a promo with 9 people in the crowd?
You can imagine.
Especially I have a spiel, where I'll be doing it and the people will get mouthy and I'll stop during promo and give them a look and just tell them to sit down and shut up. I did that just because it kind of came naturally to me. And I like when I looked out, I was like, well, they've already shut up and everyone's sitting down. So touche. But
Right.
again, man, the promoter is the one that makes, Tim Rockwell, for example. Dude, he had a great show, that Extravaganza 5, really successful event, man. Jason puts on really successful events. Herb puts on really successful
Right.
events. Central States Wrestling up in Kansas City, the promoter putting on really, really, really good events. There's a formula to what has to happen for it to be a great event, and it starts with the person promoting the show. If
Right.
you come out there and you are just like, well, I'm going to put $300 or I'm going to put $500 on Facebook, and that's going to no. You got to have a team of people. But there's a guy out in Tennessee, and I hope he's listening. Johnny Morton. He is a freaking legend, bro. He is, dude. You run a show. Every company that's out there needs a Johnny Morton working for them, because if they had a Johnny Morton working for them, they'd be drawing, 500, 600, 500, 600 people in a small town. Now I'm talking a small town of like 2,000 people, and you're drawing 25% of the town because people like him go out and do the work, and they go out and start the street teams, and they pass out the flyers. They go out and they do the radio. Jimmy Hart is another good example. When
Yep.
Jimmy comes into town, Jimmy will get on the phone. He will contact radio stations. He will contact, TV stations. And not only that, he'll contact local businesses because, hey, this is Jimmy Hart. We want to come in and do a commercial. What do you think about that? He promotes the events. You got people like Michael Berry, who is an accomplished wrestler himself, who has nothing to prove to anybody, who probably gets more TV time on AEW each week, as security for them than most of the guys that are making millions. That
Right.
guy has got nothing to prove, but he knows how to do stuff. You got to do things a certain way. It's got to be done right, and if it doesn't, then you're going to get 30 people to the shows, and that's where it starts out. KG is, you have got to have a good promoter, man. You got to have somebody, number one, who believes what they're doing. Number two, who has the financial, ability to back up their belief. And number three, not have somebody, because you know what, promoters aren't going to do it if they're losing 5,000, $10,000 a show, brother. They're just not going to do it for very long. And that goes to show you that, Jason, for example, been doing it for 20, 24 years. Herb, 52 years, man. Like, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
52 years.
Yeah.
And those
Believe it.
guys are going to be around. They're going to be around as long as they want to be, because
Yep.
of the work that they put in to get where they're at. Now they can probably, not have to work as hard, which, I mean, I'm sure if Jason heard me say that, he would say, shit, I got to work harder. And he may have to, but you establish that fan base. And now we're just really killing it. Everywhere I'm going right now, they're having great crowds. They're doing good. Ozark Mountain Wrestling's doing good. World Wrestling for a Cause is doing great. SICW is just killing it, man.
Yes.
They're killing it. And then of course, Mid States Wrestling is just
Yes.
killing it, dude. It's killing
Absolutely.
it. And I love it, man, because I'm a part of something that's very special. And I love
Absolutely.
it. And I know it. And I love it,
Miss Laura Burt says, great help, sir. I really enjoyed this interview. Thank you. I really appreciate it. That means actually,
Hey,
it
I
really means a lot to me.
I appreciate it too, Granny. And like I said, come on the 25th. If I need that chair that you're sitting on, I know I can count on you.
This is the last question for you. When the chapter is done, it's a two-part question. When your chapter is
Mhm.
done, the last page has been written, the book is closed. If there was one word that you wanted to be remembered by when it came to your wife and your kids, what would that be? And if there was one word when it came to their fans that they would want to remember you by, that they would say that about you, what would that be?
Gotcha. One word, man. Let me. Okay, two-part question. Let me give this one a little thought, man.
Sure.
You're making me work over here. You're gonna make me work. If there was one thing that I would want people to know of me, just as the person, family, father, husband, uncle, son. I know that's a lot, but I'm using
Right.
that. I mean, you see where
Right.
I'm going. You see where I'm
Yep.
going.
Absolutely.
You know, um, and then for the fans, they may not like me. They may not like what I've done over the years, but God damn it, they have to respect me. So my thing for the fans is respect. They may not like what I do and they may not understand what I do, but they have to respect the fact that I've been here for 28 years. Because if you're not doing something right, I wouldn't have made it this long. And not only would I have not made it this long, I wouldn't have made it this long working for successful companies like I do. It's a blessing to me whenever I get a call from somebody and they're like, "Hey, we want you to come down." That's a blessing, man. I love going to work for companies. I love going to work for new companies. I love going to new companies and getting that reaction, because you show up to a new place and you're going like, well, and I'll give you a perfect example. This is a perfect example, and I don't want to make this out longer but I'm a
No, go
storyteller, so
ahead.
I'll give you an example. So we're in Jonesboro for the Legends of Memphis. We had a con a couple of years ago, last year actually, and Mid States Wrestling put it on. But Mid States Wrestling put it on, and there was ACHW, or there was a handful of companies that were there. Herb was there with SICW, and each company was given a match to highlight their talent or whatever. Well, that night, I got to accompany Attila Khan to the ring. Now you got to understand, we're about 5 hours outside of our market in St. Louis, and we're about 5 hours away from our market here in Springfield and Arkansas. Well, I guess probably about 4 hours away from Harrison. So we were in Jonesboro, Arkansas, right? So I never worked. Well, no, I take that back. I did work Jonesboro, Arkansas before, but I worked Jonesboro. That was back in 07, 08. So I showed up, and we got we looked at the card, and I said, okay, we're going out first. We are the first person that they are going to see outside of the ring announcer coming out. Actually, I'm sorry. They introduced Jerry Lawler, and all that stuff, but we were the first part of the show. I had never, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to, I didn't know how we would be received. Now you understand, this is the Arab sympathizing, character. So we're in the back. They start the music, we wait for our cue. We go out. I come out, and we get the initial the initial boo, but it wasn't a loud boo. I took a step about I think about a 5 foot step, and I stopped, and Attila stopped behind me. And again, I've got the headdress on, I've got the Saudi gear, and all I did to get them going was stopped, like looked around, ripped my flag off my shoulder, and just held the Saudi flag above my head and walked around ringside to that. And brother, let me tell you what, that set the pace for that show. There was so much heat. There was a guy that was just yelling, and I would not want to be on the other side of Attila Khan in
Right.
an alley by any means.
Yep.
Well, this guy, like I look at Attila, and Attila turns around because this guy is like out of his seat. He's sitting in like the third row. He's out of his seat, and he is up against the guardrail just feeding us the business. And Attila looks back at him, and just gives him this just cold look. And I'm just like, oh man, that guy, like, I went over to him, and I just, whispered, I was like, keep an eye on that guy, and anyways, unbeknownst to me, he went to the concession stand, because if you want to file a formal complaint against what's going on in the ring, the first thing you need to do is go to the concession stand and tell the concession stand guys about it. He goes to the concession stand, and he's like, I've been a goddamn promoter for 25 years, and why the hell would you guys bring some shit like that to this town? That's ridiculous, And it's like, well, the guy told him, he goes, sir, the reason why they brought them to this town is because of the having right now. And
Right.
it set the tone for the entire night. But like walking out to what I would say would be kind of like not necessarily the reaction that I'm used to, I was able to flip that switch, throw that, do that, and let everybody know that this is what we represent, and they just ate it up. And Gary Jackson and Attila Khan went and beat the shit out of each other for 12 minutes, and it's a great match, and it was a good way to start the match. And you look at people like Attila Khan and Gary Jackson, and you look at them and you go, Jesus Christ, those guys look like wrestlers,
Right.
and not only
Yeah.
that, they look like tough wrestlers. Gary Jackson, man, he's been around for
Oh,
a
legend.
long time.
Yes.
Legendary. Again, earlier you said something about, people that I look up to. He's somebody that I look up to, man.
Right.
Like, to be in this business for as long as he's been in this business, and to, he's so inspirational to the younger kids coming in, and
Right.
he says everything that they need to hear, and
Yeah.
sometimes nobody, sometimes people, "Well, I've been working for 2 years, bro. I don't need to hear that. I know this and that." I know, no, dude, shut your
Jesus.
fucking mouth and listen to what people say, because you
Yes.
might learn something. Lucky that was for you. Shut up, you might learn something. But yeah, it just, it's it just, I don't know, man. And I completely lost track of even the question, because I
No,
got
you're
off on
good,
my
brother.
soapbox.
You're
But
good. The last comments of the night from Granny Hope says, unfortunately, I won't be in the front row. If you want my chair, I will be in the second row. And she said, you talked about earlier, I believe that was in 2024 because Anthony and I were there in Jonesboro.
Yep, it sure was. It sure was. It was a great. You were there, Granny. I remember seeing you and Anthony there. That was a great event, man. I want to say there was about 1,500 there for the wrestling show that night, and when we walked out, a lot of times, we work in gyms and stuff like that, and that was one of the first times that I walked out and like took a look around, and it was like kind of like stadium seating, and it was just jam packed, brother. We had such a good time at that event. Earl, I can't remember the name of the venue. It was a little warm, but on that card, people like Bam Bam Bundy was there. Let's see, shoot, Jerry Lawler was there. You so many people, man. That David Schultz was there. Dr. D. David
Wow.
Schultz was there. It was awesome, man. It was awesome. It was a good time, and Herb, of course, was there, and the SSCW crew was there, and Mid States were there, and I wish I could remember some of the other guys' names, but we had the Southern Heavyweight Champion that defended his belt on the card. I don't remember his name, but haha, if you know, you know, but.
Stephen E, man, I cannot thank you enough. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed this interview. I hope you enjoyed the interview. I hope it was something fresh for you. Tell fans, though, man, you're a busy guy. Tell people where they can come to see you, to boo you, to
All
hit
right.
you.
All right. I went down, I wrote a couple of the shows down just so I know. But of course, look me up on Facebook. I go with Steven Espinoza, Steven Espinoza, find me on Facebook. I've still got room for, I don't know, 1,500 more fans. So, anybody wants to really find out what's going on. I've got a Stephen E page, but man, I just don't. I'm not social media,
Right.
what's the word? I'm just not great at it, I guess. I'm not sure, but where you're going to find me at, July 25th, I'm going to be down in Rogers, Arkansas at the Rogers Convention Center for Red, White, and Bruised 4. Ozark Mountain Wrestling presents Red, White, and Bruised number 4. Again, that's going to be a tournament to figure out who the Ozark Mountain Wrestling heavyweight champion is going to be. I don't know who our second round or our third round opponent will be if that's where we make it, but I know our first round opponent is going to be Mike Anthony, who is a absolute machine, dude. He is jacked, but bell time on that right there is 5 o'clock. Doors open up at 4. You're going to see superstars like Mike Devine. You're going to see superstars like Mike Anthony. You're going to see superstars like Rex Amadeus, Scott Hansen, Luke Lane, Austin Lee. And then we're going to go ahead and go back to the Belle Claire Fairgrounds, Fair St. Clair. From what I understand, this is the first time in 15 years that they have brought back the Fair St. Clair, and SICW is going to have a part of that where we have some matches. Something else that you can catch if you're there. I think. What is that old band back in the day? Every rose has its thorn.
Guns
What
N'
was that guy's
Roses.
name? Well, no, it wasn't Guns N' Roses. Was
Oh,
it
Poison. Poison.
Poison? What was that guy's name?
Brett
George or
Michaels.
Brett? Yeah, he's going to be there too. But I don't know. Come for Brett Michaels, stay for SICW wrestling. But that's going to be at I believe 1 p.m. bell time. Awesome thing about that, guys, is hopefully we can put the nail in the coffin to this long-standing feud that I've had with the Big Texan and Bobby D. Just announced last week. I've reached out to a big guy, big shot up, just a hell of a hand. Because you know what, when the going gets tough, all Stephen E does is reach into his pocketbook and go ahead and pay the guys to come in. But you're going to have, on my team, you're going to have Peyton Ayers and the Tokyo Monster Kahagas, former NWA heavyweight champion, former NWA Triple Crown champion. He's going to be in our corner. So there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to take care of business on the 1st of August. And then August 8th, man, huge event here in Springfield at the Relics Event Center. Scott Hansen versus Astonishing Austin Moitalo. If you've been following the story behind that, Austin stole Scott's belt about 2 months ago. We tried to get it back, didn't work. They had a match last month. Austin beat Scott, which he didn't beat Scott because his foot was on the rope, but the stupid referee didn't see it. And then, Terry Zeller had butted his nose into somebody's business earlier and was having to seek medical attention at the hospital. So the interim general manager came out, Space Cowboy Jason Jones, and made a match. It's a ladder match. So what they're going to do is they're going to hang both titles up above the ring, and put ladders out there, and the first one to collect both belts is going to be the champion. So I'm looking forward to holding Sky Hansen's hands up high after that. And finally, we can close this book on Austin Muitalo. He has been a thorn in my side. Last year, Austin was probably one of the most used seconds in the WWE from the
Mhm.
independent level. I like to think that the opportunities that I opened up for him were the reasons why he got that. My buddy Gabe's about Powski. He reached out to Austin a couple of years ago and started talking with Austin on my word. And now Austin has done some stuff with Connecticut, and he's doing a good job. And a lot of people say, man, why isn't he signed? I couldn't tell you why he's not signed. I don't know. I
I have
don't
a lot.
know.
There's so many guys. I always say that, right? Why am I not seeing this
Yeah.
on my
You
TV?
know, and let me just run down and tell you a couple of guys that come to my mind right off the Luke Langley,
Mhm.
Scott Hansen,
Yep.
Austin Muitalo, Austin Lee, you know, Colton Theron Bot, which big news on I mean he's got a tryout. He's made that known. He's got a tryout, so he'll be up at SummerSlam for his tryout. Which I wish him all the luck in the world. But you know, gosh, I mean, like when you think about the talent that has come through mid states over the years,
Yes.
dude, they have got a bunch. And then you look at the talent that's come through SICW. You got people like Brandon Beretta. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Kid is just an absolute machine. Joe Helms, another guy that is just a monster.
Yep.
You got veterans like Gary Jackson. You got veterans like even Big Tex, Bobby D, Curtis Wild, Billy McNeil. You got all those guys up there
Glenn Williams,
that
man.
yeah, Glenn Williams, man. I talked to Glenn yesterday. He told me that he is this week alone, I think he's at 5 million views on his videos that
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
does. So he is going big. He's big, man. And when you can go out and you can antagonize somebody like JBL enough to draw him out of retirement, he was retired for what, 18 years, I believe.
Absolutely.
And
And not to interrupt you, but I got to say this because you brought it up again, and I've been saying this again. FanFest, I mean SICW, FanFest 5 next year. JBL is supposed to once again come out of retirement to face Glenn Williams. JBL did Glenn. Look, I'm going to be honest. He did Glenn Williams dirty this year. It's some bullshit
well,
what he did. It was chicken shit.
you know,
I'm a big
it,
Glenn
it
Williams
was.
fan.
I'm a big Glenn Williams fan myself. We did a fundraiser show last year at the MAC, the Missouri Athletic Club there in St. Louis, and you know Jason Breed and Attila Khan had a big match, and we may not have won that match, but we definitely didn't lose that match. I think at the end of the day, our point that we wanted to make got made. But while Attila's over there making sure to remind Jason Breed, why we're the top guys in SICW, some theme music hit, and here comes JBL. Well, JBL walks out to the ring, and Attila of course steps up to him, and I said, you know what, I'll take care of this, Attila, and I so it's aside, and I just wanted to read him the riot act and let him know that what was going on was none of his business, yada yada yada. Well, he didn't take too kindly to me poking at his chest, and I turned around, he grabbed me and clotheslined from hell me, and I tell you what, I spent about 4 days in bed after that, just almost ended my career, to be honest with you, almost ended my career. So I was glad when Glenn started to make the rounds, challenging JBL, because if there was anybody out there in the independents that I thought would have a good shot
Absolutely.
to take him out, it was Glenn. But then, I mean, look at what they did, dude. You talk about doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing. I don't know how they didn't, like, I don't know how the Missouri Athletic Commission didn't step in on that. Or actually, you know why? It was because it was the Illinois Athletic Commission, and the Illinois Athletic Commission is a bunch of bums over there. But how could they let not only one WWE legend, but they let three WWE legends. I don't know if you remember, but it
Yeah.
wasn't just JBL. It was supposed to be JBL versus Glenn Williams, but JBL, recruited a couple of his friends.
Power pains.
When I say friend, Howard Payne, Warlord, which
Yeah.
Warlord I've never met, but Barbarian, I've got a pretty storied history with the Barbarian. I tried to talk to him and talk some sense into him, and he wouldn't listen to me. But I tell you what, he wasn't against taking the big fat check that I wrote him a couple of months back. But then whenever I wanted to talk to him about this, he didn't want to. Apparently, his friendship with JBL was a little bit deeper than we thought. But yeah, I look forward to it next year. I actually think that Glenn Williams kind of started this because of me. He didn't want to see somebody like me. I'm not a wrestler. I'm a manager. I shouldn't be subjected to a clothesline from hell. Especially in front of in front of a capacity audience, like they had it at the Mac.
Yeah, look, I agree
Ridiculous.
with you. I agree with you. I've said JBL's a bully. I said that
Hmm.
I personally believe that what happened this year was JBL seeing the prestige shape Glenn Williams is in.
Hmm.
We all seen what JBL looked like. He knew he couldn't beat Glenn Williams 1-1. And this
Yeah,
is why it happened. As much as I love Mac Davis, as much as I love Teddy, I think that it was dirty what they did.
hmm
But that's just my opinion. And what do I know? I'm just a podcaster, man. You guys
that's right.
are the brains.
Well, I tell you what, we'll see next year. I have no
Yeah,
doubt in my mind if JBL comes out of retirement that Glenn will beat him in under 10 minutes.
absolutely.
That's gonna put JBL. It just, there's a time and place for everything, but sometimes you got to take that old steer out to the pasture and put him down. And
Absolutely.
I think it's about that time for JBL.
I completely agree
It's
with
like
you.
just be done.
Yep.
Be
Section Rights
done.
again says it was a great show. I learned a ton from the legends. Again, absolutely. How can you not learn from
And I appreciate that,
Stevie E,
Rexy. I
brother?
appreciate that. I
Guys,
appreciate that.
this wraps up this podcast. Again, Stephen E, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to finally have you on, to spend a couple of hours talking to you. Guys, don't forget tomorrow, myself, Robbie Idol, WCW veteran Robbie Idol, WCW, WWE veteran Bob Cook, and Wrestling Hall of Famer Rob Cook, the Cooker Bob Cook. We will all three be talking about what happened on Raw tonight. Did we like it? Did we love it? Did we just think it was okay? Heading into SummerSlam, I don't know, find out. And then Wednesday, oh, I'm excited about Wednesday. I have Andrew Anderson's going to be here. I am so fortunate. Look, Stephen E, I've been so blessed. Guys like yourself,
Yeah.
Andrew's going to be on. Herb has been on. I've had so many great guys on. Look, he is on his retirement tour. We can be sitting down and
Yes.
talking. And look, as you guys found out today, this isn't a normal podcast when it comes to professional wrestling. We talk professional wrestling, but I make sure not to ask the same cookie cutter questions. I like to go
No,
deep.
I appreciate that. I've done a lot of podcasts over the years, KG, and a lot of them we spoke earlier about the one question that I swear I get asked all the time, and I'm glad you didn't ask it because it just that's not the question. Everybody knows, everybody already knows. But speaking of Andrew Anderson, you have to tell him I said hello and I love him. I'll see him in a couple of weeks in Vegas. Him and Miss Karen, one of the nicest people in the world. I one of the regrets that I have in my wrestling career is that I never had the opportunity to manage him because we could have made some magic. Boy, Andrew Anderson,
Absolutely.
the Purple Haze. Oh man, he's a legend, absolute legend in this business, man. And I love him, man. I love him. I love him and Miss Karen. If you've ever had an opportunity to be around him and Miss Karen, man, every
Oh, oh my gosh.
relationship that is
Great.
out there needs to be like them. They are just
Absolutely.
they're so in love and they're not afraid to tell anybody or show anybody. And I
No,
love him for
absolutely
it,
not.
man.
I
Such a
agree.
good, such a good guy. Such
Absolutely.
a good
Guys,
guy.
please subscribe to the podcast. Until tomorrow, we'll see you then. Have a great week, Stephen E. Thank you again so much, brother.
KG, thank you, brother. Thank you, man. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good day, everyone.